Chapter 487. There were also clothes in the last life, but they were not for her, but for Qin Yuru. In the last life, Qin Yuru became the new favorite of old Madam of Duke Xing. Duke Xing's mansion left a courtyard for her and asked her to live with old Madam of Duke Xing from time to time. When such news came, Madam D and Qin Yuru were ecstatic. Then the masters of Duke Xing's mansion gave all kinds of gifts. The gifts from old Madam and Madam of Duke Xing were all extremely gorgeous, and this set was given by Xiao Yenru. When it was delivered, Qin Yuru happened to be in a pavilion in Qin's mansion. It was raining, so the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion carried the box to Qin Yuru. Hearing that it was sent by the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, Qin Yuru did not dare to neglect it and asked the servant girl to pick it up. Unexpectedly, the servant girl loosened her grip and the box fell to the ground. The gorgeous clothes inside fell to the ground and were stained with mud. Qin Wenru happened to be in an attic, which was relatively close to the pavilion where Qin Yuru was, so she saw the scene in front of her. She was afraid that Qin Yuru would think of ways to torture her if she knew that she saw her embarrassed look. So she hurriedly hid and did not dare to make any sound. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion immediately changed her expression. She glared at Qin Yuru and said, "First Miss Qin, if you don't like the gift from our first miss, just say it. Why do you ruin the gift that our first miss has carefully prepared?" After saying that, the servant girl turned around angrily and was about to leave. Qin Yuru was so scared that she came up to hold the servant girl's hand and explained, "It was really an accident just now. It was not intentional." "How could it not be intentional? Now it has been dirty. You have ruined our first miss's good intention." Xiao Yenru's servant girl said rudely. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean it. It's this bitch's fault. I will definitely punish her severely." Qin Yuru explained with sweat all over her head and then glared at the servant girl who was still kneeling and begging for forgiveness. "First Miss Qin, will you say that it has nothing to do with you? Even if we kill this servant girl, it's just a servant girl's life. How can it be compared to the face of our first miss? You humiliated our first miss like this. I will definitely report this to our old madam when I go back." The maid raised her head proudly. Hearing that she was going to report it to old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion, Qin Yuru panicked and said hurriedly, "I will go with you to apologize to your first miss now. I will definitely explain it to your first Mississippi." After that, Qin Yuru hurriedly followed the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion to Duke Xing's mansion. Because she left in a hurry, she didn't even take her servant girl with her. In this case, Xiao Yenru could do whatever she wanted to Qin Yuru. A show of strength was enough to make Qin Yuru obey her obediently. This should be one of the most important reasons why Qin Yuru obeyed Xiao Yenru in the future. Xiao Yenru was very good at grasping the psychology of others. She told old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion that Qin Yuru humiliated Xiao Yenru, which was enough to make Qin Yuru obedient. Was it her turn now? She didn't care about the box when it was placed in the corner, but now she became vigilant because of Chu Liuxin's words. What did Xiao Yenru want to do? Or did she think that she would be able to control him just because she released such a huge rumor? If not, did she have any other tricks? After thinking for a while, she remembered that there was a box left by Xiao Yenru here. The clothes have been here for a while, but they haven't been washed for more than 2 years. They are still new. Putting down the clothes in her hands, her watery eyes became more and more distant. If they haven't been here for more than 2 years, when did they get them? Hearing Xiao Wenru's words, Yu Jie's face changed dramatically. They had used this silence room for more than 2 years. If the clothes in it were proved to be only more than 1 year old, others would definitely think that they were Mrs. Clothes. Xiao Wenru stood up, walked to the corner, picked up the blanket thrown aside by Yu Jie, looked at it carefully and said, "The blanket has been here for a long time. It seems to be 2 or 3 years old." The blanket was very big, and when it was spread out, it would completely cover the box. The blanket has been here for 2 or 3 years. That is to say, the blanket was left by the first Miss Xiao, but the clothes inside were changed by you. You used the blanket left by the first Miss Xiao to cover your gorgeous clothes and used the blanket left by the first Miss Xiao as a cover. Even the nuns in the nunnery who cleaned the nunnery would not find it and would only think that it was the first Miss Xiao's old clothes, right? Yu Jie took a deep breath and suddenly understood. "Miss, what should we do now?" The clothes were obviously left for Miss, and they had been here for so long. If someone found it, Miss would not be able to explain. Even if she could prove it to Miss, she would not be able to explain it clearly. The silence room was borrowed, and everything inside was cleaned by the nuns of the Yuhui nunnery. Xiao Yanru must have sent someone in the Yuhui nunnery to put the clothes in the box. Go down the mountain later and check the clothes in Butterfly Clothing Shop. Ask Nanny Dong if she has the purchase record of these toggle and loop buttons and embroidery edges. I don't know if the clothes were made in Butterfly Clothing Shop. Check the purchase record of Duke Xing's mansion in Butterfly Clothing Shop. It would be best if Nanny Dong could recognize where the clothes are made. Xiao Wanru put down the blanket beside her hand, sat on the mat again, picked up the tea beside her, took a sip, and said after thinking for a while. The toggle and loop buttons and embroidery edges were from Butterfly Clothing Shop, but she could not guarantee that the clothes were made of the same material. She guessed that it was very likely that they were not made of the same material, but not everyone could get such a good material. Although the clothes were not made of any ready-made clothes shop, the materials were excellent. She could not think of it, but it did not mean that Nanny Dong could not think of it. In the past 3 years, Butterfly Clothing Shop had become more and more famous, but no one knew that she was the owner of Butterfly Clothing Shop. "Okay, I'll go down the mountain later." Yu Jie knew that it was not a trivial matter, so she nodded hurriedly and said, "Before you go down the mountain, go and tell Puyu Nun that I will not see guests recently. I'm going to copy 100 volumes of scriptures for my parents. Only when I calm down can I be more devout. I won't see guests from Duke Xing's mansion. Just tell them that I will come out after I finish copying." Xiao Wanru said, looked at the surrounding environment, smiled slightly, and said meaningfully, "Tell them that I will copy in this silence room. This silence room belongs to the first Miss Xiao. What if she insists on coming over?" Yu Jie blinked and said, "My parents are also her uncle and aunt." Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile and a deep look in her eyes. She was determined to take this silence room. No matter whether Xiao Yanru wanted to deal with her or wanted to get back this silence room, she would not return this silence room to Xiao Yanru, at least not before she left. When she just arrived at the Yue nunnery, she borrowed Xiao Yanru's silence room. Since she borrowed it, she had no intention of returning it. "Oh, miss, I'll go down the mountain now and ask Chu Lu to come and serve you." Yu Jie was relieved. Her Miss's biological parents were also the first Miss Xiao's elders. Moreover, there was Ru, and great elder princess. How could the first Miss Xiao really dare to force her Miss, who was devoted to filial piety to her parents, out of the silence room? As for when she would come out, it was up to her Mississippi. In fact, Yu Jie felt very strange. Her Miss seemed to want to occupy the silence room of the first Miss Xiao. She had followed her Miss up the mountain for such a long time and was very familiar with everything in this silence room. Except for the good scenery, she really didn't think there was anything good in it. However, she had always admired Xiao Wanru. Since her Miss said so, of course, there must be a reason. She retreated to the outside of the courtyard, closed the door, hurried back to ask Chu Lu to come over, and then went to Puyu Nun, who was in charge of receiving pilgrims. She explained to Puyu Nun that her Miss should be devoted to filial piety and copy 100 volumes of scriptures with peace of mind. Puyu Nun nodded repeatedly and immediately agreed to this request. She also said that even if someone from Duke Xing's mansion came over, she would help to refuse. After all, this was a filial act, which not everyone could do. Puyu Nun had a good relationship with Mingqiu Nun, so she had a better impression of Xiao Wanru. During the time when Xiao Wanru went up the mountain to cultivate in seclusion, she only occasionally saw Xiao Wanru a few times at Mingqiu Nun's place, but she rarely saw Xiao Wanru in other places. She admired the appearance of the fifth Miss of the Xiao family after being stunned. It was really rare for such a beautiful girl at such a young age to meditate in the nunnery and observe mourning for her parents for 3 years in peace. In the past, other people would observe filial piety in their own mansions. Although they ate light food, they would not really eat so light food every day like ordinary nuns in the nunnery. How much perseverance it took to do this! The first Miss Xiao, who was said to be cultivating in seclusion on the mountain, actually did not eat all the food in the nunnery. From time to time, she would send her servant girl down the mountain to buy some food. Other people in the Yuhui nunnery didn't know it, but how could Puyu Nun, who was in charge of this area, not know it? However, he could only turn a blind eye to it. All the misses from aristocratic families who cultivated in seclusion on the mountain were like this, but the fifth Miss Xiao had cultivated in seclusion for the longest time and was the most sincere, which made her like her very much. After reporting to Puyu Nun, Yu Jie took her clothes and went down the mountain. She said that and Great Elder Princess asked her to go back and report the situation of her miss on the mountain. When Great Elder Princess was worried about her granddaughter, so she asked Yu Jie and Chu Lu to go down the mountain from time to time. Everyone in the Yuhui nunnery knew that. When she went out, she passed by a nun in a hurry. When the nun saw Yu Jie, she seemed to want to stop and say something. After Yu Jie smiled at her, she waved her hand and left. It could be seen that she was in a hurry. The nun was no longer in a hurry to go forward. She turned to report to Puyu Nun. The first Miss Xiao is coming back? After hearing the nun's report, Puyu Nun looked surprised. That's what the first Miss Xiao means. She said that the fifth Miss Xiao's birthday is coming. She wants to celebrate the fifth Miss Xiao's birthday and then live on the mountain for a period of time. She wants to ask Pushun Nun to appraise some of the paintings she has drawn in the mansion. She may live on the mountain for a period of time, so it's still her own courtyard. The courtyard was her own courtyard, so of course, the silence room was her own silence room. This was originally not a problem. Speaking of which, Xiao Wanru had borrowed it at that time. But the problem was that Yu Jie just said that Xiao Wanru had closed the silence room and didn't want anyone to disturb her. Of course, it was impossible for her to celebrate the so-called birthday. As for the silence room, she was transcribing scriptures and observing mourning for her parents. It was not appropriate to drive her out like this. Puyu Nun was also a smart person. After thinking for a while, she asked the nun to bring Yu Jie's original words to the servant girl sent by Duke Xing's mansion in front of the nunnery. Chapter 488. She doesn't intend to give up your silence room? After hearing the servant girl's report, Madame of Duke Xing was annoyed at once. She reached out and slapped the table heavily, making the teacups on the table almost jump up with a gloomy face. It had been almost 3 years. In the past 3 years, she had not sent anyone to the Yuhui nunnery because she was afraid of causing trouble. At that time, it would be easier for her to say something bad. 3 years ago, the courtyard was burned down. Duke Xing's mansion had to make a concession and agreed that this girl could go to the Yuhui nunnery to cultivate in seclusion. Unexpectedly, this girl did not stop after going to the Yuhui nunnery. She even occupied the silence room that she had carefully prepared for her eldest daughter. That silence room would be of great use to her. If it weren't for her daughter's persuasion, she would have thought that the Yuhui nunnery had locked the silence room and refused to lend it to that girl. Mother, you are so naive. Compared with her, Xiao Yinru was very calm. She was so calm that there was almost no fluctuation in her heart. She felt that her mother was really ridiculous. If that little girl was so easy to deal with, she would not have gone directly to the Yuhui nunnery to observe mourning for her parents after they recognized each other as relatives. This matter was not a very honorable thing for the whole Duke Xing's mansion. Many people still said that the whole Duke Xing's mansion did not like the fifth Miss Xiao, who had been recognized by them, and did not treat the fifth Miss Xiao as their own flesh and blood. It was said that there were many people in Duke Xing's mansion who were heartless. Some people even said that old Madam and Madam of Duke Xing's mansion were not good people, so that the fifth Miss Xiao had to leave Duke Xing's mansion and stay in the nunnery to observe mourning for her parents quietly. There were different opinions. But her mother was still so naive that she thought that she could deal with Xiao Wanru with a wave of her hand. And because of Xiao Wanru, she had to leave the Yuhui nunnery in advance. The loss was not a little big. Being ridiculed by her own daughter for being too naive, Madame of Duke Xing's face turned red. Now I ask you what to do. That girl doesn't want to celebrate her birthday and only wants to observe mourning in seclusion in your silence room. Can you stop her from observing mourning for your uncle and aunt? Eldest uncle and aunt are my elders. Of course, I can't say that. Xiao Yinru said slowly. Look, you can't even do this, so what are you blaming me for? With what she said, we can't do anything about it. Even your grandmother can't make her give up the quiet room. How are you going to get your quiet room back? Madame of Duke Xing said angrily. We can't do anything, but that doesn't mean others can't. Xiao Yinru raised her head and said. She really looked down on her mother. Although her position as Madame of Duke Xing seemed to be very glorious, in fact, she couldn't even win her father's heart. She was so useless. He clearly had the support of his grandmother, and he also had a son and a daughter with himself and his brother, but he was jealous of those things, causing a rift between him and his father. Now, he couldn't even deal with a little girl, causing him to be implicated. Originally, this kind of thing only needed his mother to deal with, and he wouldn't be implicated. But his mother was so useless. Who are the others? Madame of Duke Xing was excited and no longer cared about the disrespect in her daughter's words. She had always been afraid of her daughter, so she really didn't dare to care too much about it. Mother, although fifth sister said that she didn't want to celebrate her birthday, you have to do something, right? Xiao Yinru ignored her question and asked in a different tone. I send a gift to her on the mountain every year. It's not like I didn't send it in previous years. But she is indifferent every time. Madame of Duke Xing pulled her handkerchief and said angrily. Previous years are previous years, and this time is this time. Since I said in the Imperial Palace that I would celebrate her birthday, you naturally have to make good preparations. This time, the gift must be more and better than in previous years. I will ask Grandma later if there are any gifts to send. At that time, you will send her the birthday gift from Duke Xing's mansion, Xiao Yinru said. You still ask your grandma for gifts on her behalf? Your grandma doesn't like her. You don't have to ask her. Madame of Duke Xing became increasingly unhappy. Mother, you are Madame of Duke Xing and fifth sister's second aunt. You are naturally her elder, but the real elder is Grandma. Grandma's words mean everything, but if you say one more word, it will make people doubt you. Xiao Yinru stood up and felt that she really had nothing to say to her mother. She had made it so clear, but her mother still cared about trifles. How's the thing I asked you to do before? Don't worry about it. Now it has begun to spread quietly. Being reprimanded by her daughter again and again, Madame of Duke Xing also felt ashamed, but she didn't want to say anything at this time, so she immediately said, I'll go to see Grandma. Ask people to work harder. Xiao Yinru instructed as she walked out. There were some things she didn't want to discuss with her mother, and she didn't want to say too much inside information. It was good for her mother to be her pawn. With this identity, she had an advantage. She thought that she was still stupid. She had so many advantages but didn't know how to cut the weeds and dig up the roots, so that now there were still troubles left, and she had to help her clear the obstacles. Hearing that her favorite granddaughter had come, old Madame hurriedly asked Nanny Yu to let her in. As soon as she entered the room and saw Xiao Yinru's beautiful face, old Madame was overjoyed. Without waiting for Xiao Yinru to salute, she took Xiao Yinru's hand and sat down beside her warmly. She asked someone to serve tea and said, Is it hot? Why did you leave in such a hurry? Grandma is not in a hurry. Although it had just entered autumn, it was still very hot. Along the way, Xiao Yinru's white and tender face was stained with sweat. Grandma, I'm not hot or tired. I just want to see Grandma, so I left in a hurry. In fact, it's not so hot. Xiao Yinru said softly, reached out to take a fan from the maid's hand, and personally fanned old Madame. Seeing her favorite granddaughter like this, old Madame felt more and more pity for her. She took the fan from her hand and said, Let the maids do it. You are a good Mississippi. How can you do this kind of thing? You'd better chat with Grandma. But Xiao Yinru said cheerfully. Her delicate and obedient look was completely different from that in front of Madame of Duke Xing. After sitting down beside old Madame, Xiao Yinru said to Nanny Yu with a smile, Nanny Yu, what's new outside recently? Tell Grandma about it and make Grandma happy. Old Madame liked to listen to gossip outside to kill time. If the servants around her encountered something funny when they went out, they would tell old Madame about it, and old Madame would reward them when she heard it. Therefore, when the servants of old Madame went out, they would inquire about some strange things and tell old Madame about it. There is something, but it's not good, Nanny Yu said with a flattering smile. What do you mean by not good? Xiao Yanru asked in surprise. Nanny Yu was speechless for a moment and could only look at old madam. It's not good. There is a jinx in our mansion. What good thing can there be? Old madam thought of what Nanny Yu had heard before and said angrily. Jinx? Who is it? I heard that the jinx will really be unlucky. Xiao Yanru was frightened and asked with a pale face. It's all because of Xiao Wanru. She is a jinx. Why did we recognize her at the beginning? It's good to let her continue to stay in Qin's mansion. Old madam patted the table angrily and sighed. What's going on? Xiao Yanru became more and more surprised. Your eldest uncle and aunt were obviously killed by her. After killing her parents, she will kill other elders. It's said that she has a tough life. Alas, how could such a person be so cruel to kill her parents? Fortunately, her birth destiny was suppressed by Bodhisattva in Yuhui Nunnery in the past 3 years. If she comes back, she will. Old madam had a headache. If possible, she really didn't want this granddaughter to come back. It was a mistake to recognize her at the beginning, but now she had to let her come back. Thinking that the 3-year period was about to end, old madam felt that she had to think of a way to stop her from coming back. Grandma, these are all rumors. You can't take it seriously. Xiao Yanru advised softly. How is it just a rumor? Look, your big uncle was originally fine, but because of her, he lost his life. Your big aunt was also a lucky person, the princess of the royal family, but she still couldn't withstand it and died. Before this, Hao almost lost his life, and your big brother's courtyard was burned down. All of these things happened, and it was all because of this jinx. Sigh, it's really a sin. Old madam put her fist against her forehead and was extremely angry. If there was no Ru and great elder princess, she could punish her as she liked. However, Ru and great elder princess intervened. Even if old madam used her identity as an elder to suppress Xiao Wanru, she could only suppress Xiao Wanru, but could not make Ru and great elder princess feel afraid of her. Even Ru and great elder princess would be angry. In this regard, old madam was both helpless and worried. Grandma, forget it. These are all rumors. They can't be taken seriously, and no one can prove it. It's just a rumor. Grandma, fifth sister is going to celebrate her birthday. What gift are you going to give her? Show it to Shu. Can also be enlightened and have a basis. Xiao Yanru pulled old madam's sleeve intimately and said in a sweet voice. You still want to celebrate her birthday? What kind of birthday do you want to celebrate? You don't know what you are doing on the mountain. Old madam said angrily. Grandma, it's Ru who wants to celebrate fifth sister's birthday. Fifth sister will come back soon. If we don't celebrate her birthday, we may be estranged from each other after she comes back. Xiao Yanru became more and more coquettish. Xiao Wanru was coming back? These words heavily hit old madam's heart. She had been worried about Xiao Wanru's fate these days. Now hearing Xiao Yanru's words, she was in no mood to see her favorite granddaughter coquettishly. She immediately said with a cold face. She couldn't let Xiao Wanru come back. Otherwise, everyone in the mansion would die. Why does she come back? Let her stay in the Yuhui nunnery all the time. Old madam said coldly. Grandma, how can you do this? She didn't do anything wrong. How can she stay on the mountain all the time? What will others think of our Duke Xing's mansion? Xiao Yanru looked up in shock and said. She looked at old madam carefully and didn't dare to act coquettishly anymore. Why can't she stay on the mountain all the time? She has a bad reputation. Seeing that her eldest granddaughter was still pleading for her youngest granddaughter, old madam became increasingly angry. Her bad reputation is a rumor. It's fake. Xiao Yanru was still arguing. Fake can also be true. You don't have to worry about this. If you want to give her a gift, just do it. I will ask someone to give it to her. Xiao Yanru repeated questioning finally reminded old madam. Old madam's eyes lit up. Chapter 489. Yujie came back after asking around the foot of the mountain. When she returned to the mountain, she jumped out of the carriage when it stopped. When she was about to go inside, she was suddenly stopped by someone. Are you the servant girl of the fifth miss? An old maid stood in front of a carriage with a smile, looked at Yujie, and asked with a smile. When Yujie went down the mountain, she changed into her own clothes and dressed as a servant girl. She didn't live in Duke Xing's mansion for a long time, so there were not many people who knew her. Moreover, 2.5 years had passed, so there were not many people who could recognize her. The old maid had seen Yujie before, but now she could only make a rough guess. Which fifth miss? Yujie frowned and took out some sundries from the carriage, which was full of things. The fifth miss of our Duke Xing's mansion. The old maid came over with a smile and reached out to help Yujie carry things. Yujie reached out to push her away, and then looked her up and down with unkind eyes. Who are you? It meant that she had found the right person. The old maid became happier and said cleverly, I am the servant of old madam. If there is something important, I will pass it on to the fifth miss on behalf of old madam. It is not convenient for our miss to see others now. She needs to clear her mind and copy scriptures to pray for blessings. Yujie refused. Everyone in the Yuhui nunnery knew about this. I won't disturb the fifth miss from copying scriptures. I just want to pass a message to her. The old maid became more polite with a smile, as if she didn't hear the refusal in Yujie's words. Yujie was silent for a moment and looked at the old maid with a very embarrassed look. Copying scriptures in front of the Buddha requires a clear mind. The fifth miss copied scriptures after burning incense sincerely. If she is disturbed, I'm afraid it will not be good. What do you mean? The fifth miss copied scriptures for filial piety and for the sake of heir of Duke and Infanta. But old madam is the fifth miss grandmother. Even if heir of Duke and Infanta know it in the afterlife, they will not blame the fifth Mississippi. The old maid seemed to have been prepared for this. As soon as Yujie said this, she immediately answered cleverly. These words made Yujie fall silent again. No matter who sent someone here today, even if it was sent by Duke Xing, no one could make the fifth miss pause. However, old madam of Duke Xing's mansion was an elder, and she was also the elder of heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua. It was reasonable for her to say this. You can only say 1 or 2 sentences. Yujie looked the old maid up and down and warned her. Don't worry. It's really just a matter of 1 or 2 sentences. It's about the fifth miss's birthday. The old maid smiled widely and nodded repeatedly. Yujie's heart skipped a beat. She picked up the things in her hands and walked inside. Come with me. Well, there are so many things. I'll help you carry some. The old maid reached out to help, but Yujie refused. I can carry them, but not many. As he spoke, he casually picked up his things and walked forward. Is Miss Wu happy living on the mountain? If you need anything, just tell us. Old madam means that no matter what the fifth miss needs, we should try our best to meet it. The fifth miss is now observing mourning on the mountain, and old madam is also chanting scriptures in the Buddha hall in the mansion. They have the same intention. Seeing that Yujie didn't want her help, the old maid rolled her eyes and took 2 steps forward to chat with her intimately. There's a temple in the mansion? Yujie asked. She had accompanied Xiao Wanru to live in Duke Xing's mansion for only a few days, so she really didn't know something about Duke Xing's mansion. Yes, how can there not be one? There has been one for a long time. The Buddha hall in the mansion is not small and has a large garden. Since the death of the heir and the Infanta, old madam has been sad. Every time she thinks of the past of the heir and the Infanta, she can't sleep. That's why she gets sick. Duke is afraid that old madam will be too sad, so he specially changed the small Buddha hall into a big Buddha hall and changed the whole big yard. The old maid sighed and said, in fact, the Buddha hall was not big or small, and it was the ancestral hall in the mansion. But no one would dislike more good words. Now every time old madam feels sad or thinks of the heir and the others, she will go to the Buddha hall. Duke Xing's wife also specially invited some nuns to help old madam preach scriptures. Some rich and powerful families had elders who believed in Buddhism. It was common for them to set up a small Buddha hall. After all, it was inconvenient for the elders to go out. Moreover, it was not safe. Chanting scriptures in the small Buddha hall, fiddling with incense sticks and so on, was also a necessary thing to calm the hearts of the elders. However, it was very rare to invite some nuns to come over. On the one hand, these nuns respected their reputation and couldn't be invited by anyone. On the other hand, it was really not easy to invite a famous nun and nuns. It was a simple thing. They were afraid that in the end, they would invite an unknown nun and make others laugh at them. Who are they invited by the mansion? Yujie was born in a nunnery, so she knew it well, so she asked calmly. Pushun Nun of the Yuhui nunnery came here before. It was at that time that Pushun Nun fell in love with the first miss, and the first miss also admired Pushun Nun's painting skills. After that, Pushun Nun went back to the mountain, and the first miss followed her up the mountain to learn painting. The old maid said, "This was not a secret in Duke Xing's mansion. Who is it now?" Thinking of the rumors at the foot of the mountain, Yujie continued to ask. "There is no one now. I plan to invite a famous nun to live in our mansion for a period of time, but she hasn't come yet." The old maid's attitude was very good. She answered almost all the questions and happily talked with Yujie all the way. While talking, they arrived at the courtyard where the silence room was. "Wait a minute. I'll report it to the fifth miss." Yujie stood at the door and said, "Okay, I'll wait here." The old maid nodded with a smile. Seeing Yujie carrying things in, she looked around and recognized that this was the place where the first miss cultivated in seclusion before. A trace of sarcasm flashed across her eyes. As expected, the fifth miss occupied the first miss's place. She said that she cultivated in seclusion. It was obvious that she wanted to look at the first miss's courtyard and deliberately found an excuse. Yujie came out not long after she went in and said, "My miss is copying a scroll of scripture. She asked you to wait a minute and let you in after she finishes." Of course, of course." The old maid nodded with a flattering smile. Yujie took a step back and closed the door in front of the old maid without hesitation. Then she heard her footsteps coming in. The old maid stood outside helplessly and waited. She was very anxious while waiting, especially when the old maid had something to do at this moment. Seeing that the sun was about to go down, she felt annoyed and impatient, but she did not dare to get angry. When she stood stiffly, the door finally opened. Yujie looked at the old maid expressionlessly and said, "My miss asked you to come in." She was just a poor family. Why did she put on airs? The old maid secretly despised her in her heart, but she did not show it on her face. She still smiled, as if Xiao Wenru had asked her to come in and see her as soon as she stood at the door. "Thank you, Fifth Mississippi." "Thank you, Fifth Miss." The old maid moved her legs, which were about to become stiff, and followed Yujie inside. The door of the main room was tightly locked, and it seemed that there was no one there. However, there were traces of activity in the other rooms, which were not locked. They should have been used. She carefully remembered everything she saw and then followed Yujie into the quiet room where the first miss used to live. There was a woman sitting on the mat. When she saw the girl in front of her clearly, the old maid was so amazed that she almost couldn't speak. In the old maid's heart, the first miss was almost like a fairy and the first beauty. All the servants of Duke Xing's mansion were proud of this title. But was the girl in front of her really the fifth miss? At that time, the fifth miss was still very young. Although she looked exquisite, for the servants of Duke Xing's mansion, they had a more beautiful first miss, so they did not think that the fifth miss was so amazing. No matter how outstanding she was, could she be more outstanding than the first miss? No matter how beautiful she was, could she be more beautiful than the first miss? However, the young girl in front of him only had a simple hairpin to hold up her beautiful black hair, and a strand of hair casually hung beside her ear. Under her long and curly eyelashes, her black eyes were clear and transparent, but when her eyes moved, they seemed to be full of water. Her skin was like jade, and her lips were a deep red. Not only did the light black robe not ruin her beauty, but it also made her look a bit more charming under the light. She was naturally charming and hidden behind her elegant and pure behavior. At first glance, she attracted others' attention. After looking at her again, she became more and more amazing. Although the first miss was beautiful, compared with the fifth miss in front of her, the old maid felt that the first miss was inferior. When the two of them stood side by side, it was easy to tell who was better. Seeing that the old maid was so amazed that she couldn't even speak, Yujie reached out and gently pulled the old maid's sleeve. Only then did the old maid react and hurriedly step forward to salute. Xiao Wanru waved her hand lightly, looked down, and focused on a few pieces of paper beside her hand. These pieces of paper should be the scriptures she had copied just now, and there were dense small seal characters of plum blossoms on them. "Grandma, what's the matter?" Seeing that the old maid's reaction was a little slow, Xiao Wanru raised her head again and asked. She frowned slightly and looked a little unhappy. "Fifth miss, old madam wants to celebrate your birthday, but it's not a big one. It's not convenient for you to stay in the Yuhui nunnery now. She just wants several misses to go up the mountain to accompany you, so that they can get along well with each other. After that, they can also follow you to the Yuhui nunnery to observe mourning for heir of Duke and Infanta for half a year." Half a year later, it was almost the day that Xiao Wanru originally scheduled to return to the mansion. She could refuse to celebrate her birthday, but it was not so easy to refuse to observe mourning for her father together. Moreover, it was proposed by old madam. "Go back and report to old madam, saying thank you for old madam's kindness. Grandma has already decided on this matter. Grandma means that she will also come to the Yuhui nunnery later and live in my courtyard for the time being. I will stay in the first Mrs. courtyard. If several sisters come together, they may not be able to stay here, and they can't copy scriptures for father and mother quietly." Xiao Wanru, who had prepared for this, said lightly. Old madam suppressed her with the identity of an elder, so she had to support and great elder princess. She had told and great elder princess about this before, because she was afraid that Duke Xing's mansion would do something evil. What about the birthday? Since it was and great elder princess's idea, the old maid certainly did not dare to say anything more. She could only ask about the first thing with a hollow smile. Chapter 490. I can't do anything about my birthday. Grandma wants me to observe filial piety for my parents wholeheartedly. She said that I should observe filial piety for 3 years. How can I slack off because of my birthday? If I celebrate my birthday on the mountain, Grandma will definitely punish me. At that time, I'm afraid that my sisters will also be punished with me. Xiao Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice, and then she slowly raised her head. The corners of her lips, which were as beautiful as cherry blossoms, were slightly raised, showing a natural coquettishness. However, she didn't realize that there was a trace of purity in her watery eyes. That kind of indescribable beauty made the old maid involuntarily lower her eyes and not dare to look directly at her beauty. "But old madam wants several misses to accompany you. You are going back to the mansion and haven't been close to these misses. Old madam is afraid that you will be estranged at that time." Suppressing the amazement in her heart, the old maid persuaded again. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. Old madam said as if she was really thinking about her. If she was really thinking about her, how could she suddenly do this when she was about to finish observing filial piety for 3 years? She said that they should accompany her to observe filial piety. It was not enough to humiliate her, but she also wanted to use her to spread her reputation to the misses of Duke Xing's mansion. It was a good idea. She wanted to use her 3 years to make Xiao Yenru and the others famous. Xiao Wanru had no affection for such a Duke Xing's mansion. But now it was not the time to fall out with them. She would definitely make them pay for what they owed her. I can't make the decision. If old madam insists, you can discuss it with Grandma. If Grandma directly reprimands them, it will be bad. Xiao Wanru said with indifferent eyes. She looked at her hands and carefully looked at the words she had written casually. Everyone in the capital knew what kind of person and great elder princess was. She would not save face for anyone she disliked. It was a small matter to reprimand them directly, and she might drive them away without giving face. If great elder princess really reprimanded the misses of her family, it would be extremely shameful. The old maid couldn't make the decision. Seeing that the old maid couldn't say anything for a while, Xiao Wanru said again, "You'd better go back to the mansion and ask old madam for her opinion. If I can get my grandmother's permission, I'll do whatever the elders say." Because of the fire of Duke Xing's mansion at that time, her maternal grandma had the right to talk about her affairs. Her maternal grandma even asked the Empress Dowager for part of the right to speak about her marriage, which originally showed that old madam of Duke Xing's mansion was weaker than her maternal grandma. She didn't believe that old madam dared to discuss this matter with her grandmother. Yes, I'll go back and report to old madam. I have one more thing. This is from old madam to you. The old maid said helplessly. She really couldn't make a decision on this matter. She reached out and took out a small brocade box from her sleeve and gave it to the old maid. Yu Jie stepped forward to take it and handed it to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru looked at the brocade box in Yu Jie's hand and said lightly without reaching out, "Open it." Yu Jie opened it according to Xiao Wanru's order. There was a longevity lock inside. She blinked and didn't understand what it meant, so she just looked at Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru put down the paper in her hand and reached out to take out the longevity lock from the box. She looked at it and found that it was a longevity lock worn by a child. It seemed to be a few years old. It was very exquisite, made of pure gold, and inlaid with a ruby and 2 cat's eye stones. After looking through it a few times and finding nothing, she raised her head and said, Why did old madam give it to me? When the young masters in the mansion were young, old madam gave them such a longevity lock. But fifth miss, you didn't grow up with old madam, so although this longevity lock was made long ago, it has never been given to you. The old maid said with a smile. It was made long ago? Did you know that there was a person like me long ago? Xiao Wanru looked through it a few more times and finally saw a small, Ru, character in the thinnest corner. It was really hers. However, this Ru character was newly carved. At first glance, it could be seen that it was carved recently. When Infanta Qinghua married heir of Duke, old madam prepared it long ago. She was going to give it to fifth miss when she was born. Later, heir of Duke and Infanta left, and this longevity lock has been kept by old madam. After Infanta came back, she was not in good health, so old madam prayed for Master Hao and made a new one. Now fifth miss is back. This longevity lock is just right for fifth miss. The old maid explained the cause and effect with a smile. She was afraid that Xiao Wanru would feel unlucky, so she said, the longevity locks in the mansion are all like this, and Master Hao's is also of the same style. She said that she made a new one for praying for blessings, but she felt that the previous one was very unlucky. The old maid's explanation made it even more obvious. Thank old madam for me. Xiao Wanru didn't care about this now. Fifth miss, you're welcome. I'll go back first. After old madam and great elder princess discuss it, I'll come back to report it to you. The old maid said with a smile. She didn't feel annoyed because she didn't get what she wanted at all. She quickly glanced at everything in the silence room. There were only a few things that she could see clearly at a glance. Even the box covered with a blanket in the corner could be seen clearly. Xiao Wanru didn't say anything this time and just waved her hand. The old maid left respectfully. She carefully retreated to the outside of the silence room before rolling her eyes and walking out. Miss, what do you mean? Yu Jie looked at the back of the old maid leaving and then at the longevity lock in her master's hand. Her master had grown up. Did she still need to wear this longevity lock? Yu Jie, have a look. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and handed the longevity lock in her hand to Yu Jie. Yu Jie took it, picked it up and looked at it over and over again, but she didn't find anything. She only saw a small Ru character in the corner of the longevity lock in front of her, which, of course, represented her master. Miss, I can't find anything. Yu Jie shook her head in confusion. She looked at it several times and subconsciously felt that there was something wrong with it, but she couldn't find anything wrong with it. Bring it to your nose and smell it. Xiao Wanru reminded her. She put her hand back, and her black hair fell on her shoulders. Originally, it was only pinned on the top of her hair with a hairpin. Yu Jie picked up the longevity lock, put it to her nose and sniffed it gently. There was a faint smell. If Xiao Wanru hadn't reminded her, she might not have been able to smell it. When she got closer, she found that it was indeed a very faint smell, which was almost non-existent. It was a little sweet, but it didn't seem like it. It felt a little strange, but it was not a medicinal material that Yu Jie was familiar with. Miss, what is this? Yu Jie was surprised. She was very sensitive to the smell of some traditional Chinese medicine. The smell at the moment should not be the smell of traditional Chinese medicine. I don't know. Xiao Wanru shook her head. She sat by the window just now and didn't find anything. But when she looked around, she suddenly smelled a faint smell, which was so faint that she couldn't smell it. If it weren't for the fact that she had always been concerned about old Madam's things, she would probably think that it was some smell coming from outside the window or the smell of the box itself. It was not the smell of traditional Chinese medicine that made people wary. It seemed to be the fragrance of flowers when she tasted it carefully. Some flowers in autumn had already bloomed, and the most fragrant one was the smell of osmanthus, which was much lighter than that of osmanthus. "Miss, what should I do?" Yujie shook her head, turned the longevity lock in her hand, and asked. Xiao Wanru suddenly sat up straight and reached out to pick up the box on the ground. As soon as she picked it up, she immediately found that the smell in the box was much stronger than that of the longevity lock. It was sweet, but there seemed to be some strange smell. It didn't smell very good, but it was not particularly unpleasant. The box was not big, but it was enough to hold a longevity lock. Moreover, it did look like the kind of box used to hold longevity locks. The size and shape were very suitable, and it seemed to be a little old. Put it away first. Put another box on the outside of the box and then wrap it with a cloth. Send it to Grandma. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said. She didn't know, but it didn't mean that her grandma didn't know. In the last life, she had locked herself in the backyard. In this life, she hadn't been in the capital for a long time, so it was normal that she didn't know some strange things. The only thing she could be sure of was that old Madam would not have any good intentions toward her. Yes, I'll go to Great Elder Princess's mansion later. Yujie nodded, put the longevity lock in her hand into the box, and then carefully closed it. Miss, I went down the mountain to ask Nanny Dong, who also inquired about it. She said that there were orders from Duke Xing's mansion for toggle and loop buttons and embroidery, and there were more than one order. Since the first Miss Xiao returned to Duke Xing's mansion, these orders have appeared from time to time. Although I don't know which order it was, this kind of toggle and loop buttons and embroidery should be the most popular a year ago. Yujie put the box aside, pulled out a box from the things she had just brought in, and took out the previous set of clothes from it. Xiao Wanru was not surprised by this unclear answer. How could Xiao Yanru be easy to deal with? If she hadn't been killed by Xiao Yanru in the last life, she might not have suspected that Xiao Yanru was the mastermind in the end. It seemed that Xiao Yanru was involved in everything, but there was no evidence that she was involved. This was Xiao Yanru. Where is the material? Nanny Dong said that there was not much material, so it should be an offering. But this kind of offering may not be available in other mansions, but Duke Xing's mansion must have it. But this kind of offering can be said to be made by the first Miss Xiao or by you. After all, you are now the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Yujie said what Nanny Dong had said exactly. Therefore, it couldn't be seen from the material. She raised her watery eyes slightly, and there was a trace of mist at the bottom of her eyes, covering all her emotions. It was another untraceable answer. As expected, it was Xiao Yanru who made it. Otherwise, it was impossible for it to be so secretive, as if she had blocked all the possible clues. Chapter 491. The collar was close to the neck. Not only did the material have to be firm, but it also had to be soft. There were very few clothes that could achieve these two characteristics. However, the rainbow muslin had these two characteristics, so it became one of the collars of the clothes. The requirement for sewing this dress was to be gorgeous, but the specific operation depended on the embroidery maids in the sewing room. Xiao Wanru could be sure that this dress came from the sewing room of Duke Xing's mansion. Although Xiao Yanru made a careful calculation, there was still a small error. Of course, this error was based on Xiao Wanru's knowledge of the colorful yarn. She knew about this dress given by her mother, Madame of Duke Xing, and the handkerchief given by Wang Yishu later. Otherwise, as a miss who had just arrived in the capital city, how could she know this kind of rare offering? Even the concubines in the Imperial Palace could not easily get a piece of such a big handkerchief. But Wang Yishu had it. Why did Wang Yishu have it? Of course, Duke Xing's mansion had it. At that time, she even made Wang Yishu say that she had a lot of this kind of handkerchief. At that time, she saw several misses look surprised. Although more misses didn't show anything on their faces, it was enough. At least a few misses recognized this material, knew that it was the most precious colorful yarn, and knew that Duke Xing's mansion had it. Of course, such a rare material could not belong to the fifth miss, who had just returned to her family and was disliked by everyone in Duke Xing's mansion. Madame Dong said that this is the colorful yarn. Madame Dong didn't know it at first, but later she met several nobles and they all showed this material to her. Yu Jie said with certainty, "When you go to my maternal grandma's mansion, ask about the colorful yarn and ask if my maternal grandma has it." Xiao Wanru nodded, but there were some things she was not sure about, so she had to ask her maternal grandma for confirmation. When her grandma taught her how to make the colorful yarn, she was still an outsider after all, so there were some things that her grandma would not tell her in detail. "I know. Then, shall I take this dress with me?" Yu Jie asked. "You don't have to take the dress with you. Just take the longevity lock with you. You don't have to go there today. Let's go tomorrow." Xiao Wanru looked out of the window and found that the sun had set. If she went out of the Yuhui nunnery at this time, it would not only attract attention, but also be unsafe. When she came back, the door of the nunnery had been closed early. Since she had made the decision, Yu Jie put the dress into the box in the corner again. The previous lock had been broken, so she had to find another lock. Now that she had made the decision, Yu Jie put the dress into the box in the corner again. The previous lock had been broken, so she had to find another lock. Under the lamp, Xiao Wanru wrote a letter and told Ruian Great Elder Princess in detail what had happened on her side. There were many things that she was not clear about, but she did not conceal them. She would never compare her weaknesses with others' strengths. She could to Xiao and to old who could to the old duke she who was and was she one old and had to say. She and she. The yen. Mansion she would you, and she would, and she would she. She would. She, Duke and would, the so-called kinship was full of scheming and malice. She did not need or care about abandoning them. She just wanted to maintain a superficial affinity. As for other things, Duke Xing's mansion did not treat her well, and she did not treat Duke Xing's mansion well either. After writing the letter, she let out a long sigh of relief and put down the pen. Suddenly, she looked up subconsciously and saw a slender figure leaning against the window. A full moon slowly rose from the huge window and fell on his robe, which was a little cherry red. As the wind blew, the sleeves of his robe fluttered, looking strange and evil. Under the light, his face was very gentle and handsome. He used to be a pretty boy, but now he could be regarded as a handsome man. The only thing that remained unchanged was his elegance and handsomeness, as if he had walked out of a painting. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was looking at him, he walked over slowly and sat down on the other side of the table. He reached out gracefully, poured himself a cup of tea, took a sip slowly, and asked lazily, "What's wrong? Don't you recognize me?" Recently, because it was the most important stage of the treatment, the two of them had not seen each other for a year. Xiao Wanru reached out to hold Chu Liuchen's wrist and felt his pulse with her slender fingers. Sensing that the pulse under his wrist was still slow and sluggish, she couldn't help frowning. She didn't think he was much better than a year ago, but his lips were still pale. His illness seemed to be engraved in his bones. Did it not work? Her heart skipped a beat. When she wanted to let go of his wrist, she suddenly felt that the pulse under his hand suddenly beat wildly. Her face changed dramatically and she pressed her fingers heavily again. This time, she really felt that the pulse on Chu Liuchen's wrist was beating rapidly, which could not be compared with the sluggish pulse before. "Your Highness," his pulse suddenly slowed down again. It was still the same as before, neither fast nor slow, as if he was dying. No matter how late Xiao Wanru was, she understood at this time. She loosened her hand and let go of Chu Liuchen's hand heavily. "Your Highness, is it interesting?" "Of course it's interesting." "Zhuozhuo, do you think it's boring?" Chu Liuchen smiled, stretched out his hand and patted Ru Wanru's head. Then his hand fell down and slid down her beautiful hair. His slender fingers curled up her beautiful hair, and a strand of hair curled into his fingers. He pulled it slightly, which made Xiao Wanru feel pain. She reached out to slap his hand, and then his hand fell down. He didn't know when he had such a hobby. Your Highness, have you recovered? Xiao Wenru asked with her eyes wide open. It could be seen that she was surprised and happy, and also seemed to be relieved. I haven't recovered yet. Chu Liuchen's slender eyes flashed with a trace of splendor, and he said with a gentle smile. Is there anything wrong with me? Xiao Wenru's smile froze on her little face. She blinked her big black eyes with a bit of caution and nervousness. It needs to be treated slowly, and it won't recover in a short time. Chu Liuchen picked up the teacup again and took a sip, and said slowly. It won't recover in a short time. Does it mean that I will recover as long as I take good care of it? This understanding made Xiao Wenru breathe a sigh of relief, and her eyes immediately became relaxed. When she picked up the teacup at hand and was about to drink it, she suddenly found that Chu Liuchen was looking at her with a faint smile. Her hands froze, and she silently put down the teacup in her hand. Her snow-white face was a little red. There was only one teacup on the table, which was hers and hers alone. The teacup that Chu Liuchen drank just now was hers. Now she picked it up again, but it was his. Chu Liuchen seemed to be in a good mood. Your Highness, why are you here now? Xiao Wenru pretended to wipe her hands with a handkerchief as if nothing had happened, and deliberately did not look at the teacup, which made her blush. I heard that Zhuozhua's birthday is coming, so I naturally have to come and have a look. Chu Liuchen smiled and lay down on the mat. He raised his beautiful eyes. Except for his lazy look, he really looked like a handsome child who was unparalleled in the world. It was a pity that he was sitting so loosely that he looked so lazy that he didn't even have a bone. Your Highness, where did you get the news? Xiao Wenru tilted her head slightly, and her waterfall-like hair slipped down from the side of her shoulder, making her look more petite and exquisite. Where else can I get the news? Many people in the palace have known it. I heard that it was the first miss of your mansion who said it in front of Imperial grandmother in the palace. It seems that she is affectionate and is different from other people in Duke Xing's mansion. Chu Liuchen raised the corner of his mouth, looking gentle and noble. The so-called different from other people in Duke Xing's mansion meant that other people in Duke Xing's mansion had been unkind to Xiao Wenru before. This matter had been rumored in the capital city for a long time, and there were various versions of it because of the fire in Duke Xing's mansion. But no matter which version it was, the fifth Miss Xiao was a poor girl who was not favored. She was a poor child who returned to her family but was not valued by her family. Later, she had to leave home to observe filial piety for her parents. Because of Xiao Wenru, there was a lot of controversy about Duke Xing's mansion, which had always had a good reputation. Even the concubines in the palace felt that Duke Xing's mansion had done something wrong. At some banquets, they always heard someone mention it. When the womenfolk of Duke Xing's mansion went out, they all felt that it was a shameful thing and were more and more unwilling to mention Xiao Wenru. Now Xiao Yenru's words immediately made people praise her. On the one hand, she openly expressed her kindness to Xiao Wenru, and on the other hand, she was not in Duke Xing's mansion when it happened at that time. Your Highness, what do you think I should do? Xiao Wenru raised her eyebrows and asked. Deal with all changes by remaining unchanged. Recently, Imperial grandmother has been choosing consorts for Prince Yu and Prince Zhou again. I think she can't sit still anymore. Chu Liuchen turned sideways lazily and directly lay on the mat with his back facing the sky. He kicked the table on the mat away, and then pulled Xiao Wenru's sleeve and directly pulled her over. Before Xiao Wenru could react, he pulled her into his arms as usual and held her tightly. Xiao Wenru couldn't break free even if she wanted to. Your Highness. Xiao Wenru did want to reach out to push him away. She didn't expect that he could still move so skillfully after not seeing him for about a year. It seemed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and they had been together yesterday. However, her head was held by his arm, and her slender waist was held tightly by him. She couldn't get rid of him even if she wanted to. Sensing his hard chest, which was completely different from his sickly appearance, Xiao Wenru fell silent and then stopped struggling. The sense of strangeness in her heart, which they had met again after a year, disappeared unconsciously. Your Highness, who do you think she will marry? Xiao Wenru asked. I think she wants to marry all of them. Sensing Xiao Wenru's docility, the smile in Chu Liuchen's eyes became clearer. He suddenly sat up and blew out the lamp on the table that had been kicked away. The light went out and the room suddenly became dark, but the moon outside the window became obvious and shone in through the window. Chapter 492. Xiao Wanru was startled by Chu Liuchen's action. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice and she closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she found that it was not dark in front of her. She couldn't help raising her eyes to look out of the window. Outside the window, there were mountains, and the moonlight was gentle and extremely beautiful. Feeling more and more sensitive in the darkness, she sensed that her waist was held hard, and a jade pendant on her slender waist was pulled and played with by Chu Liuchen. "Your Highness, who do you think she is most likely to marry?" Xiao Wanru was a little hot and wanted to push Chu Liuchen away. She reached out and asked. However, her hand was caught by Chu Liuchen, and then he pulled her aside. "I don't think she can marry anyone." This answer made Xiao Wanru silent for a while. In the last life, Xiao Yanru did not marry anyone. Her intended husband could not be the emperor, but Prince Zhou and Prince Yu. However, in the end, she was not their princess, and Xiao Yanru did not wait to marry them because she entered the Imperial palace. Xiao Yanru has such a good reputation and is so beautiful. Why can't she marry anyone? Her family background should be good enough. Xiao Wanru was very puzzled, which she had not figured out after her rebirth. Xiao Yanru could be said to have the first opportunity and all the benefits. Why couldn't she marry the one she wanted to marry? Moreover, she was a very scheming woman who even used unscrupulous means. A woman thinks that she can play with all the men in the world and all the men have to fall for her. She thinks too highly of herself. She is too perfect. Chu Liuchen casually played with the jade pendant in his hand. This jade pendant was given to her by the Empress Dowager. He felt that it was not bad to play with, especially when it was hanging on her slender waist. Prince Yu and Prince Zhou also have feelings for her? Xiao Wanru tasted the meaning in his words and asked tentatively. "Stay away from this woman in the future. She will not have a good end." Chu Liuchen snorted coldly. It was unknown whether he meant that Xiao Wanru was right or wrong. Then he reached out and patted her head to warn her. Xiao Wanru curled her red lips and said, "It's fine if she doesn't want to hurt me. But if she wants to hurt me, I'm not a pushover." She was sure that Xiao Yanru would not be kind to her and would definitely hurt her. Of course, she would not show any mercy. What happened in the last life was too mysterious. Xiao Wanru didn't want to tell Chu Liuchen such a mysterious thing, but she couldn't explain her hostility to Xiao Yanru. The only explanation was that there was a reason for her to target Xiao Yanru in the future. "I've sent a secret guard to guard you. If you need him, just use him." Chu Liuchen said softly, and then changed the topic. "Did Chu Liuxin come here today?" "Yes, he came with a few other ladies." "It should be a blind date arranged by concubine Ming," Xiao Wanru said. She couldn't see the expression on Chu Liuchen's face clearly in the dark, but she knew that he didn't seem to be happy at the moment, so she explained. Chu Liuxin didn't hide it from her when he came here before. When he talked about it, Chu Liuxin complained, saying that none of his brothers got married when they were his age. Why did he have to urge them to get married so urgently? Why did he come here for the blind date instead of in the capital city? Could it be that he could get a blind date in a nunnery? Chu Liuchen said unhappily. I don't know." Xiao Wanru was speechless, but she also thought that Chu Liuchen was right. The blind date should not be held in a nunnery. "Next time he comes, ignore him." Chu Liuchen snorted. "He also brought a letter to Xiao Yanru for me today." Xiao Wanru's watery eyes still looked brilliant in the moonlight. Why did he get involved in it again? If he brought a letter to Duke Xing's mansion, he would also get himself into trouble. Chu Liuchen said lightly. Although his voice was as gentle as his master's, Xiao Wanru could hear some sarcasm. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She was extremely surprised and said, "Could it be that Xiao Yanru is interested in Prince Exing?" "Why not? Didn't you say that you have a good impression of her?" "Although Chu Liuxin doesn't make much progress, he is still a prince. Maybe she will be interested in him." His words made Xiao Wanru silent for a long time. It seemed that she was surprised that Xiao Wanru was so quiet at this time. Chu Luchen touched her pink cheek with his hand and even pulled it maliciously. Xiao Wanru felt so painful that she slapped his hand away. What about His Highness? Didn't she look for His Highness? Chu Liuxin was an indifferent person, so was Chu Luchen. Since Chu Liuxin was interested in her, Chu Luchen might also be interested in her. Although he was in an awkward position and had always been in poor health, he was favored by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor after all. Of course she did. But after being slapped by me, everything became peaceful. Chu Luchen said lazily. What? His Highness slapped her? After being stunned for a moment, Xiao Wanru turned over and stood up. She put one hand on Chu Liuchen's chest and said in surprise. This was something she didn't know in her 2 lives. When did it happen? About 3 years or so. This king can't remember exactly when. She almost bumped into this king's arms. This king was angry and gave her a slap. After that, this king also fell. Chu Luchen reached out his hand and knocked on her elbow. A sore feeling made Xiao Wanru's hand sore. She directly fell down and pressed on Chu Liuchen's chest. This was a more shameful position than before. Xiao Wanru's face turned red. She hurriedly turned to one side and still looked like she was half held by him before. At this time, she was glad that there was no light. Otherwise, he would laugh at her. She calmed down and asked again, this should have happened before she came to the Yuhui nunnery, right? It should be. I didn't notice it. As long as she doesn't provoke me, I don't care how many men she seduces in this way, as long as she doesn't disgust me. Chu Luchen reached out his hand to make her lie down more comfortably without changing his expression. In the darkness, no one noticed the hostility in his treacherous eyes. Your Highness, do you know why Xiao Wanru built this quiet room? Is this quiet room really just for learning painting? This place is really good. Xiao Wanru finally calmed down and asked. I really didn't notice it. If you want to check it, you can ask someone to do it. I left you the secret guard you used in Duke Xing's mansion. If you need anything, you can find him. Next time, ask Xiao Xuanzi to instruct your servant girl named Yujia. This servant girl seems to be strong and powerful. If you have time, you can ask her to come to my mansion to learn martial arts. Chu Luchen closed his eyes calmly and said. He smelled the faint fragrance of a girl. It was not the kind of fragrance of powder, but the faint body smell of a girl with a slight fragrance. In such a night, it made people feel very peaceful. The place in his heart that had been empty for many years had been filled up at some time. As his voice became lower and disappeared completely, the sound in the room became quiet for a while. Suddenly, there was a low knock on the door. Once, twice, thrice. Xiao Wanru was shocked and hurriedly opened her eyes. She almost fell asleep just now. Chu Luchen reached out to hold her slender waist and pulled her into his arms again. After hugging her for a while, he put her down and sat up. He tidied up his robe and said, I'll go back first. If there is any sound later, remember not to come out. Xiao Wanru nodded silently and also sat up. Watching him open the door and leave, she frowned tightly and looked at the dark place at the door. After waiting for a while, she suddenly heard a loud sound coming from outside and the sound of weapons clashing. She couldn't help holding her knees with a nervous look in her eyes. Mississippi, Yujia hurried in and closed the door of the silence room. There was no light in the room, so she couldn't find Xiao Wanru for a while. Come here. I'm on the mat. Be careful of the table in front of you. In the dark, Xiao Wanru saw Yujia clearly and reminded her softly. The table that had been kicked out happened to be in front of Yujia at this time. Yujia hurriedly reached out to hold it and touched the low table. While holding the table and walking towards the mat, she said, Miss, the prince told you not to go out. What's going on outside? Even though the door was closed, she could still hear the sound of weapons clashing. I don't know. Just now, I took a peek and found that it was coming from the other side of the wall. I don't know if something happened or if it was the wall. I don't know what happened or what happened over there. Yujia said uneasily. She had just been warned by Xiao Xuanzi not to go out. This matter had nothing to do with them. If she got involved, she would get into big trouble. The high wall? Xiao Wanru frowned. She had an intuition that it had something to do with the former emperor's concubines. She had always wondered whether Xiao Wanru chose to cultivate here and said that she wanted to learn painting well not only to fish for fame but also for other purposes. Otherwise, why would she spend so much energy and money? This silence room looked simple on the surface, but in fact, it was not simple at all. Every plant and tree inside was very exquisite. It could be seen that a lot of effort had been spent on it, and it could not be built overnight. It seemed to be too ostentatious just for the sake of fishing for fame. What was more coincidental was that the high wall was next to it, and the location of the side door was much closer than the courtyard where she lived. What did Xiao Wanru want, or what did Duke Xing's mansion want? She quickly thought of the things in her last life. Suddenly, she thought of a person who was related to Xiao Yanru. This person seemed to have a deep connection with Xiao Yanru, but there seemed to be no special relationship between her and Xiao Yanru. In fact, she was quite surprised to suddenly think of this person at this time, because that person was found from the common people. Chapter 493. As soon as the news that a villain suddenly appeared in the Yuhui nunnery and intended to kidnap the former emperors, the whole capital city was in an uproar. The Yuhui nunnery was very famous. Not only did Buddha have a spirit, but also the former emperors were locked in it. Of course, this was just a legend. Few people really entered the deepest part of the Yuhui nunnery and saw those locked up. They were once beautiful, but now, they were nothing more than green lamps and ancient Buddhas. Even if someone remembered them, it was just a pity that they didn't have children. Who asked them to not have children? The issue of the former emperor's heirs was the former emperor's biggest weakness. Dongsang had been established for decades, and it was the founding emperor and the former emperor who had single-handedly conquered the country. However, because of the issue of heirs, the ministers who had been loyal to the former emperor were now also loyal to the current emperor. There was nothing to say. Even if Prince Chen was alive, he was just waiting for death. Looks like it's okay. Who knew how long he could live? Even if someone wanted to make use of Chu Luchen, they had to be able to make use of him. It was said that he was lying in bed now, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The stomachs of the were disappointing and they deserved to be locked up. Many of the loyal officials of the late emperor who hated their stomachs for not being able to live up to expectations cursed in their hearts. But even if he scolded them in secret, he could only scold them in secret. Moreover, it had been a long time since the incident. Even Chu Luchen, the only son of the late emperor, was about to die. What was the point of scolding a few women? As for assassinating them, he didn't think it was necessary. They were just waiting for death in the depths of the Yuhui nunnery. It would be troublesome to kill them. There were only a few nuns guarding the Yuhui nunnery. There was no need to pay much attention to other aspects. But just when everyone was careless, something happened in the Yuhui nunnery. Some nuns were killed, and it was said that the former emperors were also killed. After it shocked the whole capital city, the emperor was furious and sent someone to the Yuhui nunnery to investigate the matter. He immediately requested to find out the truth of the matter and not to let anyone kill the former emperors. The meaning of this was enough to make the emperor unable to sit still. Although they were just a few useless women waiting to die, if they were killed, it would be another matter. They might even doubt the legitimacy of the emperor. If that was the case, they really couldn't be underestimated. Therefore, few men appeared in the Yuhui nunnery. A large number of soldiers of the Ministry of Justice began to come in and out. Some misses of aristocratic families who had been cultivating in seclusion on the mountain had to go back to their mansions for fear of getting into trouble. At this time, they should stay as far away as possible. No one was willing to get involved in the issue of the throne. If he was not careful, he might provoke the 9 clans. Xiao Wanru didn't move, but when the officials of the Ministry of Justice came to check, and Great Elder Princess was already there. The procurator of the Ministry of Justice had to wait outside for a long time before he saw Great Elder Princess. "Greetings, Great Elder Princess." The procurator of the Ministry of Justice stepped forward and saluted Great Elder Princess. "What is it?" Great Elder Princess asked coldly. "I want to ask where 5th Miss Xiao was at that time. Did she hear anything or see anything?" The quiet room where 5th Miss Xiao was at that time was not far from the place where the accident happened. She should have heard something. The procurator answered carefully for fear of annoying Great Elder Princess. Are you suspecting my granddaughter? Great Elder Princess's face became colder and colder. I'm not suspecting. I just want to ask Fifth Miss Xiao if... The procurator swallowed his breath and said awkwardly. This was an order from his superior, and he had to do it. However, this matter would obviously offend Ru and Great Elder Princess. It was said that Great Elder Princess doted on Fifth Miss Xiao as if she was a treasure. How dare you! Great Elder Princess slammed her hand on the table so hard that the teacup on it almost fell down. The sweat on the procurator's forehead came down immediately. Grandma, don't be angry. This is a routine matter. You can let him ask. You can feel at ease if he asks. Xiao Wanru said softly to help him out. Yes, Great Elder Princess, this is an order from the Emperor. It is a routine matter. I just want to ask Fifth Miss Xiao. After that, I dare not disturb her again. The procurator nodded repeatedly, for fear that he would make Great Elder Princess angry again if he spoke slowly. It was impossible for him to suspect the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion, who had been practicing in seclusion on the mountain for almost 3 years. Before they came here, they had also investigated the various situations of the misses who were practicing in seclusion on the mountain. They knew that Fifth Miss Xiao was observing filial piety on the mountain, and the 3-year period was coming to an end. She was young, had an extraordinary status, and was a delicate woman. Moreover, she had cultivated for many years and observed filial piety for her parents. Speaking of this, it was a very admirable thing. She was not like those elegant women who said that she cultivated in seclusion, but in reality, she was just enjoying the scenery on the mountain and admiring the flowers. Just based on this point, the prefect judge admired this determined young lady from the heart. Hearing that she helped him out of trouble, he had a better impression of her. Then you can ask. I will listen here. And Great Elder Princess said slowly after being silent for a while. Yes, I will answer quickly. It is just a routine matter. Thank you, Great Elder Princess. The procurator wiped his sweat and thanked her repeatedly. Then he raised his head to look at the fifth Miss Xiao. When he entered the door, he only noticed Great Elder Princess, so he did not dare to look around. When he saw the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him, he could not help but be stunned. But he reacted quickly. He hurriedly lowered his head and was secretly amazed by her beauty. This was the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing and Infanta Qinghua. She was so beautiful that she could be called an exceedingly beautiful woman. He had seen the most beautiful woman in the capital city. But in the eyes of this prefectural judge, the so-called most beautiful woman in the capital city was not as beautiful as the one in front of him. Fifth Miss Xiao, what were you doing when the accident happened? The procurator was also a determined person. After being amazed, he immediately became clear-headed and lowered his head to ask. For the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him, he thought it was better not to look at her shimmery eyes. Otherwise, he would feel that any question he asked was a blasphemy to the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him. That day, I had gone to bed early. But later I heard the sound outside, which seemed to be weapons. My servant girl also heard it, so she stayed with me that night. Xiao Wanru said gracefully. Chu Luchen put out the candle early. Even if someone noticed her, they would think that she had fallen asleep. Moreover, she did fall asleep at this time in the past. Anything else unexpected? The procurator became serious and asked after thinking for a while. Nothing else. Then I fell asleep with my servant girl's back. When I woke up, it was already chaotic outside. The nun in the nunnery sent several groups of people to ask if it was safe. After that, my grandma also came, Xiao Wanru answered. This was indeed the truth at that time. After Yujie came in to accompany her, they did not say anything. They just listened to the sound of weapons outside in silence. Yujie had been worried that someone would come, but Xiao Wanru did not worry about it. Later, she fell asleep with her back against the mat. Fifth Miss Xiao, can you allow me to ask your servant girl again? The procurator heard Xiao Wanru's words and said with a nod. Go ahead. Xiao Wanru nodded. Yujie then followed the procurator to the yard to ask. You were really not scared yesterday? Great Elder Princess looked Xiao Wanru up and down and asked with concern. Before she could say anything, the procurator of the Ministry of Justice came in. "Grandma, don't worry. I'm fine," Xiao Wanru said with a charming smile. She reached out to pull Great Elder Princess's clothes and shook it coquettishly. She was really close to her grandma. Before she found out her origin, she had been very close to Bru and Great Elder Princess. It turned out that her grandma really loved her. She stood by her side and considered everything for her. "It's good that you're fine. Do you want to go down the mountain? It's not safe to live up there. I don't know what will happen." Although Ru and Great Elder Princess breathed a sigh of relief, she still felt worried. "Grandma, don't worry. Even if it was not safe before, it will be very safe now. The people of the Ministry of Justice are keeping an eye on it. What can happen in the Yuhui nunnery? Besides, if I go back, I have to go back to Duke Xing's mansion, but I don't want to go there," Xiao Wanru said directly in a charming voice. Her words made Ru and Great Elder Princess feel distressed. She hated old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion more and more. If old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion had not been merciful, her granddaughter would not have fallen into such a situation. "Grandma, if I go back at this time, I will not only be controlled by them, but also wasted the past 2.5 years. People will only laugh at me for not being filial and perseverance. Even my father and mother in the netherworld will probably blame me." Xiao Wanru's eyes turned red and she said gloomily, if she went back at this time, her good reputation that she had worked so hard to build would be in vain. Of course, Ru and Great Elder Princess knew this, but she was more reluctant to leave her granddaughter for fear that something bad would happen to her. For a moment, she was angry and sad and couldn't even say a word. "Grandma, if you have time recently, come to the mountain to see me. You can live in my courtyard, and I'd better live here. Madame of Duke Xing wanted me to go down the mountain before, and she has sent me several letters. Old Madame also said that she would hold a birthday party for me in the Yuhui nunnery." Xiao Wanru raised the corner of her mouth sarcastically and said what she had intended to say to Yujie when she went down the mountain. "What? Does she really think that the Yuhui nunnery is her backyard and she can come and go as she pleases?" And Great Elder Princess snorted and her face turned pale with anger. In fact, she had planned to go up the mountain today because of the words from the Empress Dowager, saying that the first Miss of Xiao's mansion publicly expressed her deep sisterhood with her granddaughter and said that she would hold a birthday party for her granddaughter in the Yuhui nunnery. Now even old Madam of Duke Xing said so. She was really muddle-headed. "Zhuozhua, don't worry. As long as I am here, I will never let them make trouble about holding a birthday party. The Yuhui nunnery is not a place where Duke Xing's mansion can do whatever they want." And Great Elder Princess became more and more annoyed and sneered. Such a big thing had happened in the Yuhui nunnery, but Duke Xing's mansion had not sent anyone to ask about it. She would never spare the old muddle-headed for this matter. Chapter 494. When the door was opened, Xiao Yinru came in with a maid. She was wearing a light peach-colored 8-piece dress, with a plum-shaped silk ribbon around her waist and a slender waist. Looking up, Xiao Yinru could see a light purple gauze dress, a light pink half-arm, and her elegant temperament. At first glance, people would think that the woman in front of them was elegant and outstanding, and her delicate face made her look even more outstanding. After entering the door, she didn't look around but just bowed respectfully to Ru and Great Elder Princess sitting in the middle and said, "Greetings, Great Elder Princess." "Get up." Great Elder Princess waved her hand peacefully and motioned her to get up. "Great Elder Princess, where is my 5th sister?" Grandma and Mother were very anxious when they heard that something happened in the Yuhui nunnery. Grandma also suffered from an old illness for a while. Mother was busy taking care of her, so she asked me to come to see my 5th sister. "If you can't live here anymore, you can go back to the mansion first and come back to live after the matter here is settled." Xiao Yinru raised her head with a gentle smile full of concern on her face. Ru and Great Elder Princess's eyes fell on Xiao Yinru's face. In the past 2 years, Xiao Yinru rarely appeared in front of others and only said that she wanted to focus on learning painting. Now it seemed that this first miss of Xiao's mansion was really unusual, and it was reasonable for her to say that at this time. Zhuozhuo was frightened last night and can't get up now. Great Elder Princess sighed with a little sadness on her face. Fifth sister was frightened and fell ill? The smile on Xiao Yanru's face also faded and became a little sad. Her every move seemed to be very sincere and made people feel good about her. Such a big thing happened not far away. She is just a child and she is alone here. How can she not be afraid? Speaking of this, Great Elder Princess looked cold and said, "Your grandma is sick now? Did he fall sick from fear at this critical juncture?" Xiao Wanru was not far away from the scene of the accident, but old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion was far away. Ru and Great Elder Princess's words obviously contained a little sarcasm. Grandma is suffering from an old illness. Since autumn, she has been in poor health from time to time and often gets sick in bed. She has been like this these days. If it weren't for this reason, Grandma would have come to see Fifth Sister long ago. Fifth Sister has been in the Yuhui nunnery for the past few years, and she would cry every time she mentioned it. Xiao Yanru said softly, as if she didn't hear the sarcasm in Great Elder Princess's words. She still treated Great Elder Princess's words sincerely and explained sincerely. Behind the bamboo curtain, Xiao Wanru showed a cold smile on her cherry lips. Xiao Yanru was really not easy to deal with. What she said made people feel that she really wanted to be on good terms with her. Even if the elders had shortcomings, she would try her best to make up for it. Even if she couldn't make up for it, she couldn't be blamed. After all, those people were her elders. No wonder she had such a good reputation outside. In Chu Liuxin's eyes, she was also a very good person who valued sisterhood very much. Sisterhood? In this life, Xiao Yanru was in a different situation. Her birth experience had been exposed, so she talked about sisterhood with her. In the last life, she also talked about sisterhood with her. Sure enough, this sisterhood was conditional, and it was conditional for others to see. Xiao Yanru's words were very appropriate. It not only explained old Madam's health condition, but also showed that old Madam valued Xiao Wanru. Although Great Elder Princess didn't quite believe it, at least she wouldn't really embarrass Xiao Yanru. Although she didn't get along with old Madam and Madam of Duke Xing, she wouldn't go too far with Xiao Yanru, a junior. Is not feeling well now, so it's inconvenient for her to meet guests. First, Miss Xiao, please go back first. Although she wouldn't go too far, and Great Elder Princess didn't like Xiao Yanru very much, so she immediately waved her hand and said, "Yes, these are some nourishing herbs. Grandma asked me to bring them up the mountain to Fifth Sister. Please give them to Fifth Sister later." Xiao Yanru said softly and pointed to the gifts brought by the servant girl. Great Elder Princess nodded and looked like she didn't want to talk anymore. Xiao Yanru asked the servant girl to put the gifts at the door and left slowly. When she came to the yard, she saw two servant girls standing on the side to serve Xiao Yanru. She nodded and asked Yu Jie, who was Xiao Wanru's servant girl. Then she asked about the details of her daily diet and what happened last night with concern. Yu Jie had been asked by the deputy of the Ministry of Justice before. Now Xiao Yanru asked her again, so she told her in detail. Xiao Yanru also asked her to serve Xiao Wanru well and report to Duke Xing's mansion if anything happened. After that, she left with the servant girl. After leaving the courtyard, he turned around to take a look before decisively turning around to leave. She went to the Zen room of Pushun Nun. She could be regarded as Pushun Nun's disciple. Since she had come to the Yuhui nunnery, she should visit Pushun Nun. After talking with Pushun Nun for about 2 hours in the Zen room, Xiao Yanru left. The number of people coming and going at the gate of the Yuhui nunnery was about twice as much as usual, and most of them were from the Ministry of Justice. Xiao Yanru stood at the gate and didn't get on the carriage immediately. She looked back and narrowed her eyes, looking at the officials of the Ministry of Justice who were in a hurry. She put down her handkerchief and slightly pressed the corner of her mouth to cover a trace of sarcasm. Then she got on the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion and went all the way to Duke Xing's mansion. When the carriage stopped, she got out of the carriage and saw her eldest brother walking out in a hurry. Seeing her get out of the carriage, he stopped and waited for her to come over. "Eldest brother, Where are you going? Xiao Yanru came over and asked. When Shichi invited me to a tea party. Xiao, the first young master of Duke Xing's mansion, waved the fan in his hand and looked elegant. Both brother and sister were very good-looking. Xiao Hua, and also looked gentle and elegant. He had a good reputation for talent, but he had missed the last round of the Imperial examination in spring and wanted to have a try in this round. Qi Tianyu got the third place in the last round, and Wen Shiqi got the first place. When Shiqi first worked in the Hanlin Academy, and in just over 2 years he entered the Ministry of Justice. It could be said that he had a bright future. Those who entered the officialdom at the same time as him were at most crawling in the Hanlin Academy. None of them officially entered the 6 ministries like him. The 6 ministries had always been the framework of the entire imperial court. Xiao Hua and Wen Shiqi grew up together, so he didn't feel alienated just because of Wen Shiqi's promotion. Such a big thing happened in the Yuhui nunnery, but Wen Shiqi, as an official of the Ministry of Justice, didn't go to investigate it. Instead, he was in the mood to hold a tea party. It was really surprising. Is it only eldest brother? How can it be only me? Many talents in the capital city will go there. In fact, the invitation card has been prepared for a long time. It was supposed to be cancelled today, but when Shichi said it was unnecessary. He was free in the morning, and it was his turn in the afternoon. He asked us to go there in the morning. Xiao Huayan explained. Then he looked behind Xiao Yanru and said with a frown, "Fifth sister won't go down the mountain? Didn't he say that something like this happened? It's not suitable for her to stay on the mountain as a girl." Eldest brother, do you want her to go down the mountain? Xiao Yanru smiled and suddenly said meaningfully. Xiao Huayan spread his hands and said, "Can I have the final say in this kind of thing?" Xiao Yanru smiled more and said meaningfully, "We can't have the final say in this matter. But it's our mansion's business. It's not easy for them to intervene. Sister, you can deal with this matter. I'm going to meet my friends." Xiao Huayan said and strode out. There were some things that the brother and sister were well aware of. Seeing her eldest brother leave, Xiao Yanru smiled and walked inside. She had to go to old madam's place. Her maternal grandmother was Ru, and great elder princess, so what? She couldn't be compared with her biological grandmother, right? Because she had to take care of Xiao Wanru, and great elder princess temporarily lived in Xiao Wanru's courtyard. Xiao Wanru lived in Xiao Yanru's courtyard. 2 servant girls, Chu Lu and Yu Jie, also came to serve her. Then she was accompanied by a little servant girl named Qin. Because she was just a low-class servant girl, many people who paid attention to her didn't pay attention to her and thought that she was sent by Ru, and great elder princess, to serve Xiao Wanru. The people in the Yuhui nunnery were interrogated again and again. Even Xiao Wanru was interrogated twice. The rest of the people were interrogated again and again. Since such a big thing happened in the Yuhui nunnery, the number of pilgrims who were going to come to the mountain immediately decreased by half. Everyone just wanted to pray quietly. No one wanted to make trouble while praying to the Buddha. One day, when Shichi suddenly came to see her. In the past few days, although Xiao Wanru didn't go out of the courtyard or even the silence room, she still knew clearly what had happened outside. Qin ran around outside all day long, so she could get a lot of news. Moreover, she was less conspicuous than Yu Jie and Chu Lu. Hearing that when Shichi asked to see her, Xiao Wanru paused for a moment and said to Yu Jie, "Ask if Lord Wen has anything to do with me." Yu Jie nodded and left. After a while, she came back and reported, "Lord Wen said that he had misunderstood you before and wanted to apologize to you in person." Xiao Wanru put down the brush in her hand and looked at a cassia tree she had painted. After thinking for a moment, she said, "Go and tell Lord Wen that there is no need to apologize. It has passed. It doesn't matter." 2 years ago, when Shichi suspected that she had an ulterior motive for getting close to her. Although time had passed, she had saved the person she should save and repaid the kindness she should repay. At this time in the last life, when Shichi had already been in trouble and had been bedridden. In the last life, he was not the top scholar in the same period as Wen Tianyu. In this life, his fate had changed. Judging from the way he treated Gu Shishu that day, she knew that he would not repeat the same mistake. In this case, his future had nothing to do with her. That was all she could do for him. Moreover, she was in trouble now. If others found out that she had a relationship with Wenshichi, it would not be good for him or herself. Chapter 495. It started to rain. The rain was not heavy, but it was a little cold, which swept away the heat of late summer and early autumn. Standing at the gate of the Yuhui nunnery, Wenshichi looked back at the tall Buddhist hall of the nunnery behind him. The layered Buddhist hall looked a little more leisurely in the drizzle, but it was not the scene in his dream. There was also a drizzle in his dream, but he was lying in front of the couch by the window, with a slender figure of a woman sitting beside him. He could not see her face clearly, but he knew that she was gently feeding him medicine. She reached out her hand to gently wipe his forehead, and then smiled with watery eyes. In the dream, he could not see clearly who the woman was, but he inexplicably thought of Xiao Wanru. After waking up, he unconsciously compared the figure in the dream with Xiao Wanru, but in fact, there was no comparison at all. The Xiao Wanru he saw was the Xiao Wanru from 2 years ago. Not to mention her small figure, even her figure was different from that of the woman in the dream. But inexplicably, he felt that this person seemed to be Xiao Wanru, who had grown up. He wanted to take the opportunity of coming to the Yuhui nunnery to see Xiao Wanru and verify whether she was the woman in his dream. In fact, the woman in his dream did not appear in his dream very often, but he had dreamed of the same woman 3 times in a row, which made Wenshichi want to find out the truth. He reached out to touch his head and looked at the servant beside him holding an umbrella for him. He inexplicably felt that he really worried too much. It was just a dream, but he actually took it seriously. In particular, he even associated it with Xiao Wanru, who had nothing to do with him at all. It was really a joke. He had always been sober in the past, but now he was confused. He looked back at the Yuhui nunnery behind him, wondering how the girl who looked smart 2 years ago was now. However, no matter how she was, it had nothing to do with him. After all, she had an extraordinary identity now. If she needed help in the future, he would definitely help her. Not to mention that he had misunderstood her, he should thank her for helping him recognize Gu Shishu's true colors. But it was not necessary for him to thank her in person. There was a difference between men and women, and they might never have a chance to meet each other in the future. His heart inexplicably became heavy. Then he smiled helplessly. "Child, are we going back to the mansion now?" Seeing Wenshichi get in the carriage, the coachman asked. "Go to Prince Yu's mansion." Wenshichi thought for a while and said, "Let's go to Prince Yu's mansion." Although the Ministry of Justice was in charge of what happened in the Yuhui nunnery, Prince Yu was in charge of it in the end, so it had to be reported to him in the end. Originally, this matter was handled by the Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Although Wenshichi got an important position, he was only a subordinate official of the Ministry of Justice. However, he was good at writing, so the Minister of the Ministry of Justice valued him very much. A few days ago, he asked Wenshichi to draw up a detailed memorial for this matter and send it to Prince Yu's mansion for Prince Yu to present to the emperor. Although what happened in the Yuhui nunnery was a big deal and even alarmed the emperor, there was no trace of it after that. No one knew where the black-clad man who appeared in the Yuhui nunnery that night came from and what his purpose was. No one was missing inside the high wall. Except for a few dead people, the rest were all there. The Minister of the Ministry of Justice was also very flustered about a case that had not been found out but was reported to the emperor. Therefore, he presented the memorial to Prince Yu first. To put it bluntly, Wenshichi was a ghostwriter and an errand runner. The coachman obeyed, turned the carriage around, and drove it to Prince Yu's mansion at the foot of the mountain. Wenshichi lifted the curtain again and involuntarily looked at the depths of the Yuhui nunnery. It had been more than 2 years since Xiao Wanru entered the Yuhui nunnery. In another half a year, she should go down the mountain. It seemed that Duke Xing's mansion would not be peaceful. Since his mansion was adjacent to Duke Xing's mansion, he might be able to help Duke Xing's mansion in some small matters. Wenshichi wholeheartedly wanted to help Xiao Wanru in order to repay her kindness of reminding him at that time. Unexpectedly, things were unpredictable. In the end, he went against Xiao Wanru. The Yuhui nunnery became quiet again, which made Xiao Wanru very happy. When Qing came to report that all the officials of the Ministry of Justice had withdrawn from the Yuhui nunnery, Xiao Wanru came out for a walk. It was drizzling outside, making the whole mountain seem to be covered with a layer of mist. In the mist, people felt more relaxed and happy, and the mountain was ethereal. The rain in the Yuhui nunnery was very beautiful. Standing in the corridor and looking at everything outside the courtyard, Xiao Wanru's mind seemed to be much more open. It was very quiet in the courtyard. Several servant girls were busy with their own things, and no one came to disturb Xiao Wanru's peaceful mood at the moment. But then the courtyard door was knocked loudly. "Go and have a look," Xiao Wanru said to Qing who was standing in the corridor. Qing answered and ran to the courtyard door. As soon as she opened it, a person rushed in. She was so scared that she took 2 steps back and almost fell. She pulled the door and looked at the woman in front of her in astonishment. "Who are you?" Qing didn't know her. She had just come to Xiao Wanru's side and was not familiar with the people in the nunnery. "Is your miss here?" The woman looked a little embarrassed. She looked up and saw Xiao Wanru in the corridor at once, so she ran over in a hurry. "Miss Mo, what's wrong with you?" Yu Jie, who knew her, hurried forward to greet her. It was a woman named Mo Chui, who also lived in the Yuhui nunnery and cultivated in seclusion. She was also the person whom Chu Liuxin mistook that day. She had lived on the mountain for a period of time, longer than Xiao Wanru. It was said that she was a relative of a nun in the Yuhui nunnery and had no other relatives alive, so she came to the Yuhui nunnery to cultivate in seclusion. She had met Xiao Wanru several times in the past, but they didn't keep in touch. "Fifth Miss Xiao, can you do me a favor?" Mo Chui came over and bowed to Xiao Wanru first. Her face looked a little pale, and her hair was wet on her forehead, covering her beautiful face. "What's the matter?" Xiao Wanru looked her up and down and said gently, "I have a good friend from the same hometown who came to the Yuhui nunnery and wanted to stay with me for a few days. I didn't expect such a thing to happen suddenly. Although the officials of the Ministry of Justice have left, they are still checking at the foot of the mountain. Fifth Miss Xiao, could you please ask Ru and Great Elder Princess to take her down the mountain when she goes down the mountain?" Mo Chui wiped the rain on her head and said with a gasp, "Didn't the officials of the Ministry of Justice see her on the mountain?" Xiao Wanru looked at Mo Chui's anxious face and asked in confusion. If they had found out the truth on the mountain, even if the officials of the Ministry of Justice were there when they went down the mountain, they would just ask about it as a routine. "I asked her to hide out before. She came here to find me, because she wanted to stay with me temporarily. She was forced to marry an old man in his 70s or 80s. Mo Chui bit her lip and said helplessly, "I didn't dare to let others see her. Every time someone came to ask about her, I asked her to go to the back mountain." The back mountain of the Yuhui nunnery was actually very large, and there were some scenic spots for people to enjoy. However, there were also some inaccessible places. Even though the Yuhui nunnery was nearby, the dense places with cliffs and precipices were dangerous even for people who were agile. Therefore, the nuns in the Yuhui nunnery would not go there. "You asked her to hide in the deep mountain behind the Yuhui nunnery? It's too dangerous there. She might lose her life if she is careless." Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes slightly and said in astonishment, "But we have no choice." She said that if she was really found and sent back to her family, she would rather die than get married. Mo Chui said helplessly, "No one would be willing to marry an old man in his 70s or 80s. She would indeed feel that her life was worse than death." Xiao Wanru fell silent for a moment and did not agree immediately. "I heard that Fifth Miss Xiao is the granddaughter of R and Great Elder Princess. If Great Elder Princess can take her down the mountain, she will definitely be able to avoid the investigation of the Ministry of Justice. I hope Fifth Miss Xiao will be kind enough to help her." Mo Chui bowed deeply to Xiao Wanru and said eagerly, ignoring her embarrassed look. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat and a trace of hesitation flashed across her eyes. "Fifth Miss Xiao, I beg you. You practice in the mountain and observe mourning for your parents. It can be seen that you are a filial person. You won't leave a helpless girl in danger. If she is really caught, she really doesn't want to live. She has been very stubborn since she was a child, so she ran away from the marriage. The fifth Miss Xiao doesn't save her. I'm afraid that she will go to extremes again. Mo Chioi's tears fell down one by one, and she looked extremely pitiful. Miss Mo, I'm afraid it's not convenient for my grandma. But if you can wait for a few days, when people from my mansion come here, I'll ask them to take your fellow villager down the mountain, okay? Xiao Wenru asked softly. Fifth Miss Xiao, I know that your mansion is from Duke Xing's mansion, but how can the servants of Duke Xing's mansion compare with the carriage of and Great Elder Princess? If she can get the protection of and Great Elder Princess, she will definitely be safer. Mo Chui wiped away her tears and looked at Xiao Wenru imploringly. Moreover, it's better to do it as soon as possible. If someone finds out that she is here, I'm afraid that she will lose her life. Where's Miss Mo's hometown? Is it very close to here? Xiao Wenru asked in surprise. It's indeed not very far, so I'm especially afraid that someone will find it. Please take pity on her, fifth Miss Xiao. Mo Chui said vaguely. This time, even Chu Lu could tell that something was wrong. She walked behind Xiao Wenru in a few steps and looked at Mo Chui with burning eyes. She was very suspicious of Miss Mo, who could be regarded as her close neighbor. Miss Mo was too impatient. Could it be that it was so urgent that people in their 70s or 80s immediately came to the mountain? Miss Mo, I can't make the decision for my grandma. If you can wait for a few days, I'll definitely arrange for your fellow villager to leave in a few days, and I'll definitely not let anyone find it, in case your fellow villager gets hurt. Xiao Wenru said softly with an increasingly gentle look. Mo Chui's expression changed and she suddenly stood up straight. Fifth Miss Xiao, if you can help me, just do it. If you really don't want to help, just don't help me. Why do you have to find so many reasons to prevaricate? After saying that, she turned around and ran out. Hey miss, why is she like this? Chu Lu was so angry that she wanted to stop Mo Chui. However, Mo Chui had already run out of the yard and disappeared. Miss, what does she want to do? She can't even wait for a moment. Even if her fellow villager doesn't want to get married, she doesn't have to make it so urgent. I heard that Miss Mo's hometown is very far from here. Even if she finds her fellow villager on the mountain, she won't get the news so soon and come to catch her. Moreover, you have promised her that you will help her. Yu Jie, who had seen farther, couldn't help asking at this time. I don't know what she wants to do, but it's not a good time to get my grandma involved. Xiao Wenru's face darkened. Looking at the boundless drizzle, she suddenly thought of something, a thing that had nothing to do with her in her last life, and her eyes involuntarily became cold. Chapter 496. Did something happen to and Great Elder Princess in the last life? She was a little confused. After all, these things were too far away from her. She was just a painter who entered the Imperial Palace to paint portraits for beauties temporarily. How could she know these things in the royal family? She seemed to have a vague feeling that and Great Elder Princess had an accident because of a woman, which seemed to have something to do with the Yuhui nunnery. On that day, 2 palace maids were secretly gossiping, and she happened to be hiding from Xiao Yenru, who came in anger, and also hid in the bushes. So she overheard them at that time. The late Emperor, Great Elder Princess, the woman surnamed, Mo confessed, Yuhui nunnery. Bits and pieces of memory came to her mind. Mo Chui had lived near her for so long, but she had never thought of this matter. At this time, it was suddenly mentioned. If she guessed correctly according to these bits and pieces of memory and words, Mo Chui should be the one who confessed Great Elder Princess in the last life. But Xiao Wenru couldn't figure out what exactly she confessed and what rebellious thing Great Elder Princess had done to make a stranger confess it. They were not from the same place. Mo Chui had been on the mountain for many years. She heard that she had been well-behaved for so many years. Besides, she also helped to do some things in the Yuhui nunnery and usually stayed in her yard. It was impossible for her grandma to have any contact with her. But if it was not her, this woman was too suspicious. Who was her fellow villager? Why did she insist on being taken by her grandma? Could she assume that she also found her grandma in the last life and asked her grandma to take a person down the mountain? Something big had happened in the Yuhui nunnery, but it had not been found out yet. Could it be related to Emo Chioi's fellow villager? Then her so-called fellow villager was a big problem. Her watery eyes became more and more thoughtful. No matter whether it was related to Emo Chioi in the last life or not, there must be something wrong with Emo Chioi. When will Grandma come? After taking a deep breath, Xiao Wanru slowly calmed down her depression, and a pair of bright and beautiful eyes showed a bit of coldness. These days, and Great Elder Princess often came to chat with her. The two of them got along very well and warmly. The Great Elder Princess should be here. This servant will go to the door to take a look. Qing trotted out. She was the youngest and the most carefree among them. She looked very innocent, but she was sent here by Chu Luchen. Xiao Wanru sent a maid who knew martial arts to protect herself. If there was anything special, she could ask her to call for help. Chu Luchen sent another secret guard, who was also under Qing Er's command. Miss, that woman stopped Great Elder Princess. Qing Er suddenly shouted at the door. Xiao Wanru walked to the door. Yu Jie took a big umbrella beside her and held it up to block the rain for Xiao Wanru. The rain was not heavy, but it kept falling. The ground was wet. Just a few feet away from the gate of the courtyard, Emo Chioi knelt in front of Ru and Great Elder Princess, kowtowing and crying, begging Ru and Great Elder Princess. Rin Great Elder Duke was cold-faced and soft-hearted. When he saw such a delicate little girl kneeling in front of him, he couldn't help but he began to ask questions. Xiao Wanru was far away. When she walked over slowly, she saw that Emo Chioi stood up and seemed to be about to whisper something in Ru and Great Elder Princess's ear. Xiao Wanru had a bad feeling. She reached out to pick up a stone beside her and threw it at Emo Chioi. Seeing that, Qing hurriedly picked up another larger stone. She weighed it in her hand and threw it at Emo Chioi. Xiao Wanru didn't hit it accurately. The stone fell to one side, but everyone was shocked and looked up to see who was so rude. Great Elder Princess, you must save this person. She is your. Emo Chioi ignored the stone and continued to whisper to Great Elder Princess. Speaking of this, she couldn't help screaming in pain. Her body was thrown to one side by the stone and she almost fell. Her stone. Seeing that her beloved granddaughter came over, and Great Elder Princess showed a kind smile and raised her head. She ignored Emo Chioi and didn't care about Emo Chioi's words. Emo Chioi felt bad. At this time, she couldn't tell the truth to Ru and Great Elder Princess in a low voice even if she wanted to. She could only stare at Xiao Wanru with hatred. It turned out that Xiao Wanru ruined her plan again. Grandma, did I ask you to take a person down the mountain? Xiao Wanru walked over quickly and said softly. She sounds so pitiful. And Great Elder Princess reached out to touch Xiao Wanru's head. Finding that it was a little wet, she said hurriedly, "Why did you come out? It's raining. If you get wet, you will get sick easily. I came to pick up Grandma. She begged me just now and asked me to tell you about it so that you could take the person down the mountain. There are many things in Yuhui nunnery. I don't know what happened before. I don't want to make trouble for Grandma, so I asked her to wait for a few days. In a few days, I will find a way to help her fellow villager." I didn't expect Miss Emo to get angry. She scolded me and came to stop Grandma by herself. Xiao Wanru calmly glanced at Emo Chioi, who was standing beside her with her head down, and said. She confirmed again that there was something wrong with this girl. At the moment when Emo Chioi walked over, she couldn't be mistaken. The hatred in Emo Chioi's eyes almost overflowed. What did she do to make her hate her so much? Could it be that I didn't agree to help her find her maternal grandmother? If that's the case, then this Miss Emo is really narrow-minded. She hates others to death when others don't want to help her. What's the meaning of this? Xiao Wanru said casually. But and Great Elder Princess, who was a member of the royal family, immediately understood some of the meaning in it. She nodded at once and looked at Emo Chioi. Miss, I can't help you with this. After saying that, she turned around and left with Xiao Wanru without waiting for Emo Chioi to raise her head. And Great Elder Princess thought that Emo Chioi was not a good person because her granddaughter's kindness was rewarded with a scolding. Moreover, The accident in the Yuhui nunnery was related to the former emperor's S. She knew many S of the former emperor. At this time, she should avoid arousing suspicion. If it was in the past, and great elder princess might be more casual. She really dared to do something that others dared not do. But now she had Xiao Wanru and her younger brother. Naturally, she could not be too willful. She didn't want to get involved in some things, especially this kind of thing that was related to the former emperor and the current emperor. Seeing and great elder princess leave with a large group of people, Emochioi almost gnashed her teeth with hatred. She almost could have done it. Unexpectedly, Xiao Wanru ruined it. Looking at Xiao Wanru's back with hatred, Emochioi knew that she could only think of another way to solve this problem. She turned around and strode away in the rain. She still had a way to solve this problem. Back in the silence room, Xiao Wanru helped great elder princess to sit down. Then she took the tea served by Yu Jie and took a sip. "Grandma, what did she say just now? It seems that she wants to tell it to you in private?" Putting down the teacup in her hand, Xiao Wanru asked curiously. She tilted her head slightly, and the delicate little girl looked a little innocent and lovely. Seeing this, great elder princess's heart softened. She said casually, she said it was about her fellow countrymen. She saved me to help her and said that I would not regret it. Later, seeing that I didn't agree, she said that she would tell me the identity of her fellow countrymen. What's the identity of her fellow countrymen? Xiao Wanru's heart tightened. I don't know. She didn't say it later. I don't know her identity. Could it be that a miss of a family in the capital city ran away from her marriage? I haven't heard that a miss of a family wants to marry an old man because her family doesn't like her. And great elder princess felt it was funny. Speaking of this, she was still very confused about how that woman found out about her. Seeing her kneeling in the mud, she did sympathize with her for a moment and wanted to agree with her impulsively. Being reminded by her granddaughter, she also knew that it was not appropriate to do this, especially at this moment. When the former emperor's concubines had an accident, he should be on guard against people with royal blood like her. It would be unwise if she bumped into them at this time and found out something. It was better to avoid trouble. Zhuozhua and her younger brother were still young. Without her support, they might be bullied badly. In this regard, great elder princess felt that she should be cautious in the future. Grandma, is there anything among the former emperor's concubines that can make a fuss? Aren't they all childless concubines? Xiao Wanru turned the teacup in front of her, blinked her smart watery eyes, and looked more and more curious. Only a trace of deepness flashed across her eyes. She always felt that there was something behind it, but she couldn't figure it out for a while. Only her grandma, who seemed to know a lot of inside information, might know something. I don't know what they are making a fuss about. They are just childless concubines. It's impossible that the former emperor has a posthumous son. Great elder princess shook her head casually. She really didn't understand why anyone would pay attention to those women who were locked up. Chu Luchen was the only son of the former emperor, and he was still so sick and weak. Even if someone wanted to make use of him, they couldn't do anything. Grandma, is it true that the former emperor only has Prince Qin as his son? Xiao Wanru didn't show it on her face, but her heart was slightly moved. Of course, he is the only one. There is no other one. It's impossible for the former emperor to have other bloodlines. Even if those concubines are rescued, so what? And great elder princess sneered. At this moment, she decided to make decisions as the first princess of the royal family, so she didn't feel ridiculed for some people's secret plots. Xiao Wanru fell silent for a while, and her watery eyes narrowed tightly. There was such a person in the last life. She didn't know whether he really had the former emperor's bloodline, but he just said so, but he didn't officially recognize it. If there was really a posthumous son, why didn't he get the emperor's approval? But if he was not, why did he treat him very well at that time? Xiao Wanru only hated that she died early and didn't figure out many things. In addition, she lost her memory, so she didn't know many things and was confused. Chapter 497. Fifth Miss, Old Madam asked me to come to the Yuhui Nunnery to tell you that Old Madam will come to the Yuhui Nunnery to see you in a few days. By the way, she will worship the Buddha, pray for blessings for the mansion, and give you a birthday gift. The person who came was Nanny Yu, who served Old Madam. When she saw Xiao Wanru, she stepped forward with a smile and bowed. Although she had been serving Old Madam for a long time and had always been respected in the mansion, she was still very well behaved when facing Xiao Wanru, especially when and Great Elder Princess was sitting beside her and eyeing her covetously. Your Old Madam is really considerate. Aren't you afraid that your fifth Mrs. Life will be shortened? And Great Elder Princess sneered. Hearing this, Nanny Yu secretly felt bad. There was a knot between and Great Elder Princess and her Old Madam. This knot did not disappear with time, but became more and more intense. Old Madam hasn't seen the fifth Miss for so long and misses her very much. Recently, such a thing happened in the Yuhui Nunnery. Old Madam is really worried, so she came to the Yuhui Nunnery to see the fifth Miss on the pretext of celebrating her birthday. Nanny Yu explained with a smile. She is so young, and she is cultivating in the Yuhui Nunnery and observing mourning for her parents. Does your Old Madam want to make it a big deal or make a big deal so that Zhuozhuo can't rest in the Yuhui Nunnery? The Great Elder Princess's voice grew colder. Nanny Yu's face changed. In fact, she had tactfully told Old Madam about this matter at the beginning that it was indeed inappropriate to celebrate the birthday of the fifth Miss, who was observing filial piety and cultivating here, in the Yuhui Nunnery. However, after listening to the first Miss's words, Old Madam felt that it was a good idea to hold a wedding here, and it was a good time. Something happened in the Yuhui Nunnery. As a grandmother, she was worried about her granddaughter, so she came to visit her on her birthday. This showed that Old Madam was kind to the fifth Miss, and it also showed that Old Madam really loved the fifth Mississippi. It was not the rumor that all the people in Duke Xing's mansion disliked the fifth Mississippi. Go back and tell your Madam Dowager that if she really wants to treat Zhuozhuo well, don't mention anything about her birthday. She can give her a birthday gift if she wants to. Seeing Nanny Yu's expression, and Great Elder Princess immediately understood. She smiled gently and said with a bit of coldness. She glanced at the pile of gifts on the ground and said, "Take these gifts back. How can Zhuozhuo wear this kind of brocade clothes at this time? Or is it that when the young miss of your family lives here, she always wears such colorful clothes?" Xiao Wanru's eyes followed and Great Elder Princess's words and fell on the pile of gifts. There were several bolts of brocade in bright red and green, the brightest colors. It couldn't be said that such a bright color was wrong. In fact, this bright color was very suitable for a young girl like Xiao Wanru. But this was not the right place. He tugged at the gray robe on his body, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint mocking smile. Her lip color was much brighter than that of ordinary people. Even if she didn't wear lipstick, people would think that her lip color was too enchanting and charming. If she wore such a bright color, who would believe that she was really practicing in the Yuhui Nunnery and observing filial piety for her mother? When Xiao Yanru went down the mountain before, the first thing she did was to promote her reputation. Now that she was going down the mountain, she would trample on her reputation. She was so scheming. She treated others as fools. If she hadn't seen the brocade in the box, with today's scene and the brocade from Old Madam today, the previous dress would have been hers even if it hadn't been hers. She raised her long eyelashes and looked at the 8 maids behind Nanny Yu. This was a big scene, and she believed that many people had seen it on the way here. This is part of the birthday gift from Old Madam to the 5th Mississippi. Since it has been brought here, I'm afraid that Old Madam will be angry if I take it back. Nanny Yu said uneasily. She turned to Xiao Wanru and said, "5th Miss, do you want to accept it first? Since you don't like it very much, you can't refuse Old Madam's gift." "I dare not refuse it." "Nanny Yu, it's not that I can't accept it, but it's not appropriate for me to accept this kind of brocade in the Yuhui Nunnery now. If Old Madam really loves me, she will naturally know this." Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She narrowed her watery eyes slightly and said softly, "If she really loved Old Madam, she would naturally know that it was not appropriate to give it away like this. If she didn't love Old Madam, Why did she have to pretend to be sympathetic? Xiao Wanru's words could be said to be extremely impolite. You can go back. Come on, send them out. The great elder princess ordered impolitely. Nanny Gao, who was standing beside her, waved her hand, and several maids immediately went over to help clean up and put away the things placed here. There were 8 maids, no more and no less. Nanny Gao came over to take Nanny Yu's hand and pushed her out with a smile. Although the expression on her face was kind, her actions were not kind at all. Seeing Nanny Yu go out, the 8 maids of Duke Xing's mansion looked at each other and then looked at Ru, and great elder princess, who had a cold face and was extremely dignified. They were so scared that they lowered their heads and hurriedly followed Nanny Yu out. Nanny Yu, please. Great elder princess is in a bad mood now. You better go back first. Let's go. I'll see you out. Nanny Gao took Nanny Yu's hand intimately and pulled her out. Nanny Yu originally wanted to struggle, but when she heard her words, she immediately stopped struggling and went out with Nanny Gao helplessly, hand in hand. Great elder princess was in a bad mood, so even old madam didn't dare to provoke her. If she bumped into great elder princess now, she would be courting death. Originally, there were 8 maids from Duke Xing's mansion, plus Nanny Yu. Now there were 16 maids, plus Nanny Yu and Nanny Gao. They sent the gifts to the gate of the Yuhui nunnery in a more powerful manner than before. The people who saw them on the way were all dumbfounded. Someone had seen Nanny Yu go in before, and now they saw the gifts come back and Nanny Gao send them out. Some people had already begun to talk about this matter. Some well-informed people immediately knew that it was a gift from Duke Xing's mansion to the 5th Miss, who was cultivating in seclusion and observing mourning here. When they saw those red and green gifts, they thought that the 5th Miss, who was cultivating in seclusion, couldn't let go of these gorgeous and vulgar things. Now that they were sent back, they thought that even the 5th Miss didn't know the gifts were sent. They didn't know which master of Duke Xing's mansion sent these gifts. They really didn't know the rules. Nanny Yu was helplessly pulled out by Nanny Gao. Xiao Wanru stood up, walked to the box beside her, and took out the gorgeous clothes. She turned around and walked to Gu and Great Elder Princess. She handed the clothes to Great Elder Princess and said, "Grandma, do you think the collar is made of colorful yarn?" Great Elder Princess looked at the box in the corner in surprise and then looked at the clothes in Xiao Wanru's hands. She suddenly felt distressed. Xiao Wanru was in the prime of her life and had such a beautiful appearance, but she was locked in the Yuhui nunnery. She couldn't even wear the beautiful clothes she liked and could only hide them secretly. For a moment, she became more and more angry with old madam of Duke Xing's mansion. If it weren't for that muddle-headed old woman, how could her granddaughter fall into such a situation? "Grandma, can't you see it?" Xiao Wanru didn't notice that Great Elder Princess was absent-minded. She thought that Great Elder Princess couldn't see it for a while, or the colorful yarn was not very obvious. So she shook her sleeves and asked again. This time, Great Elder Princess finally woke up. She reached out to touch the collar, picked it up and looked at it against the light. After a while, she confirmed, "This is the material of colorful yarn. Why is it so little? Zhuozhuo likes it. Grandma, I will go to the Empress Dowager tomorrow and see if she has this kind of colorful yarn so that I can make a set of clothes for Zhuozhuo." Xiao Wanru was stunned at first, and then she understood Great Elder Princess's misunderstanding. She burst into laughter. "What's wrong? Is what Grandma said wrong?" And Great Elder Princess was confused by her laughter and looked at Yu Jie, who was also smiling sweetly. "Great Elder Princess, this set of clothes doesn't belong to our young Mississippi. It has always been in that box. This box was there before our young Miss came and it has always been locked. That day, our young Miss asked this servant to break open the box and found this set of clothes inside." Yu Jie hurriedly explained with a smile. There was a lot of information in her words. The more and Great Elder Princess heard, the more her face darkened. She picked up the clothes at hand and looked at them, and her face immediately became cold. "Zhuozhuo, the 1st Miss of Duke Xing's mansion is up to no good." "Grandma, do you think so?" "I think so too, but I don't know how I got in her way. I haven't even met her." Xiao Wanru stopped smiling and said with a confused look, When Xiao Yanru came that day, Xiao Wanru hid, so they didn't really meet each other. There is no good person in Duke Xing's mansion. Like mother, like daughter. Her mother is black-hearted. It's no wonder that her daughter is good. And great elder princess sneered angrily and shook the clothes in her hand. At first glance, I can tell that this dress is very good. It seems to be a set of the same material as the one just now. As for the colorful yarn on it, it is even more precious. Although the neckline is so small, the palace doesn't get much colorful yarn. It's good enough to take out such a little. Duke Xing's mansion is really willing to spend a lot of money. Grandma, what do you think? Xiao Wanru nodded. She confirmed that the colorful yarn was Xiao Yanru's doing. I'll take the clothes for you and throw them back to the old woman directly. Let her see what kind of person the granddaughter she has raised for more than 10 years is. And great elder princess stood up and was about to leave. Chapter 498. What did you find? Chu Luchun stood in front of the window with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were calm and gentle. The morning sun was not very hot, and it slanted in through the window. This was a good position. The extra floor of the dark tower could not be seen from the outside. The slanted eaves created an illusion of the view from the outside. The extra floor could not be seen from the outside, but the inside could see everything clearly. Nothing was found. They said that there was no shortage of people. The palace sent someone to check secretly again. Xiao Xuanzi reported respectfully, and then presented a confidential document. Chu Luchun took it and casually flipped through it. It was a list of the former emperor's concubines who were locked up in the high wall. Several high-ranking concubines were accompanied by servants, and the low-ranking concubines were alone. His eyes fell on a few names at the bottom of the list. He turned back and put the confidential document on the desk. He picked up the pen in his hand and casually scratched it twice. Then he stretched out his slender fingers and knocked on the table twice. He pointed at the confidential document with his chin and said, "Just these few." "Yes, master. I'll do it now." Xiao Xuanzi took 2 steps forward, picked up the confidential document and put it in his sleeve. When he was about to leave, he suddenly said, "Master, the palace said that they want to see you." He pointed out of the window, which was the range of the palace. "I'm sick and don't want to see them." Chu Luchun said coldly. "Master, what about the soup?" Xiao Xuanzi hesitated for a moment. This happened almost all the time. He also knew that his master was missing, but as a servant he still had to report this kind of thing. According to the past practice, pour it. Chu Luchun sat on the chair and picked up a booklet to read. His face, which was as gentle as jade, was indifferent. Even though he said so, he only looked a little colder. But Xiao Xuanzi knew that it was not just a little coldness that could be seen. He originally wanted to persuade him, but when he saw Chu Luchun's face, he covered his mouth and left helplessly. He really didn't know how to persuade him about this kind of thing. Standing at the foot of the pavilion, he turned around and walked towards the side door connected to the palace gate. At the side door, a beautiful palace maid was waiting there with a food basket. Seeing Xiao Xuanzi coming over, she hurried forward and said, "What did your highness say?" "You'd better take it back. His highness means that if you take it in, it will be thrown out." Xiao Xuanzi looked at the palace maid and said helplessly. The palace maid's face darkened, and the basket in her hand fell down powerlessly. But she still picked up the basket and handed it to Xiao Xuanzi. She said in a choked voice, "I made it myself. I got up early in the morning and made it myself. If you don't like it, just pour it out. But at least I brought it over and told His Highness." After the maid finished speaking, she wiped her tears and turned to leave. Xiao Xuanzi looked at her back and then at the food basket in his hand. He shook his head helplessly and went back with the food basket. His Highness said to throw it away as usual. After that, he had to deal with the affairs. He didn't expect that there would be such a thing in the Yuhui nunnery. He was afraid that he had to rearrange the things in His Highness's place. Besides, he had to find a more suitable place to send the things to the fifth miss. Why is it such an old lock? Xiao Wanru looked at the lock that had been closed and hung on it in astonishment. Not only the lock, But also the chain was very old, and there was even some rust in some places. There was not much rust, but there were some interlaced places. But the more it was like this, the more people felt that it was an old lock. It was more suitable and similar to the one found by Ru and Great Elder Princess. This lock is more like a lock from 2 or 3 years ago. Yujia looked up and down at the lock and then looked at the one brought by Great Elder Princess in the corner. She immediately made a judgment. Compared with the one brought by Great Elder Princess, this lock was more like a lock from 2 or 3 years ago, but it was not particularly rusty. Of the 2 locks brought by Great Elder Princess, one was full of rust, and the other was just a little old, but it didn't seem to be obvious enough. The one Chu Luchen took coincided with what Xiao Wanru wanted. Send the rusty one to Grandma, and keep the other one and throw it into an empty corner in the back mountain with the previous one. Xiao Wanru was very satisfied with the comparison and said, "Miss, why don't you send both of them back to Great Elder Princess?" Yujia asked in confusion. Send both of them back. After the incident, Grandma will still ask where this lock came from. Xiao Wanru smiled and said meaningfully. Yujia rolled her eyes and understood. She immediately picked up the most rusty one and said, "Miss, I will ask the servants of Great Elder Princess's mansion to take this one away and leave the other one." Great Elder Princess left Yue Nunnery yesterday, and the lock was sent here with gifts by her servants today. The servants of Great Elder Princess's mansion were still waiting outside. If Xiao Wanru felt that it was not good, Great Elder Princess would certainly ask her to find another suitable one. "Go ahead." Xiao Wanru nodded and said. Yujia took the lock and went out. After a while, she came in with a frown and said, "Miss, old madam sent a Buddhist gift to Yue Nunnery and asked you to take care of it these days." The so-called Buddhist gift was some offerings at home, which had to be placed for a certain number of days. If the host family took care of them and lit the incense and candles by themselves every day, it would be more sincere and effective than those offered by the nunnery. As soon as her grandma left, someone from Duke Xing's mansion came. They were really in a hurry. No one else from the mansion came? Xiao Wanru slightly raised the corners of her mouth with a hint of sarcasm in her beautiful eyes. It was said that the first miss wanted to take care of it, but she couldn't come for the time being because of something. Old madam made a wish in front of the Buddha before, and offering the Buddhist gift is also to fulfill the wish. It happens that you are on the mountain, so she didn't ask anyone else to come. After a period of time, old madam will go up the mountain in person to return the wish. Yujia said, "Bring her in." Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and said. Yujia nodded and went down. After a while, she came in with an old maid. After entering the door, she first bowed to Xiao Wanru with a smile, and then raised her head to look at the 5th Mississippi immediately. She was amazed. All the people in Duke Xing's mansion knew that their first miss was the most beautiful and had always been proud of her. But when she saw the 5th miss in front of her clearly, she immediately felt that the first miss was far inferior to her. Seeing that the old maid was staring at her miss in a daze, Yujia coughed unhappily. Xiao Wanru also looked at the old maid and found that she had never seen her before, so she asked lightly, "Are you sent up the mountain by old madam's side?" The old maid was startled by Yujia and hurriedly came to her senses. Hearing Xiao Wanru's question, she hurriedly said with a smile, "Old madam means that since the 5th miss is on the mountain, she won't ask anyone else to come." Originally, this wish is also for the sake of the heir and infanta. When it came to her father and mother, Xiao Wanru had to agree. With a trace of darkness in her watery eyes, she asked, "In front of which Buddha?" "In the most famous Buddha hall in the Yue Nunnery." "5th miss, you only need to go there and burn an incense stick in the morning and evening," the old maid answered. There were many Buddha halls in the Yue Nunnery, but the most famous one, or the one that the madams of aristocratic families in the capital thought was the most efficacious, was not the biggest one, but a medium-sized one. Coincidentally, it was the one where Xiao Wanru tore apart Huiqing's true face 2 years ago. At that time, the religious ceremony in Prime Minister Zhang's mansion was held there. "Do you want to hold a religious ceremony?" Xiao Wanru nodded. "Yes. When old madam gets better in a few days, she will bring people from the mansion to hold a religious ceremony," the old maid replied after a pause. This matter hasn't been decided in the mansion. Xiao Wanru keenly noticed the old maid's delay and asked. Old madam means, basically, it has been decided that she will come, but it is not sure whether the other madams and misses in the mansion will come or not. The old maid did not expect the fifth miss to be so sensitive, so she could only say it bluntly. The third madam said that she was not in good health and could not come, and the two misses of the third branch did not intend to come with the excuse of taking care of their mother. Old madam and madam intended to hold a grand and beautiful ceremony to attract the attention of the whole capital city. But after the third branch made such a fuss, the ceremony seemed a little unharmonious. The third branch was originally weak in Duke Xing's mansion, but 2 years ago, the third madam suddenly became strong and dared to go against madam in some things. In this case, madam would give in to the third madam, and sometimes even old madam turned a blind eye to it. The servants in the mansion were the best at observing the situation. Once they found that the third branch became strong, they immediately did not dare to ignore the third branch openly or secretly. Is there anything that is not sure? Looking at the old maid's look, Xiao Wanru knew that there was something wrong and continued to ask. I am afraid that the third madam is not in good health. It depends on the situation. The old maid was embarrassed, but she had to say it. Is the third aunt not in good health? Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She had already understood the reason and smiled slightly. It seemed that the third madam was not stupid. She used some clues left by Qin Yuru at that time and got some evidence against Madam of Duke Xing. It took not only courage but also confidence to say no when old madam wanted to burn incense to repay the vow. If she did not have the confidence, she must have evidence against Madam of Duke Xing. Since the car accident, the third madam has not fully recovered. She gets sick from time to time. Old madam and second madam are very anxious and have seen many doctors, but there has been no cure. The old maid sighed and hurriedly explained. It was madam who asked her to say so. Xiao Wanru nodded and didn't ask more questions this time. She just looked at Yu Jie beside her. Yu Jie understood and took the old maid away. After asking the old maid some details, she came back to report to Xiao Wanru. Then she let the old maid take people to decorate the Buddha hall. Miss, I have asked. It is said that Pushun Nun is in charge of old madam's religious ceremony this time. After the old maid left, Yu Jie came in and reported. Isn't Pushun Nun devoted to Buddhism and doesn't even go out of the meditation room in the past? Xiao Wanru narrowed her watery eyes and said. This matter was getting more and more interesting. I also felt strange. I asked the old maid and she said it was for the sake of the first miss, Yu Jie reported. Chapter 499. Having been in the Yuhui nunnery for so long, Xiao Wanru had never met this Pushun nun. On the one hand, it was because this nun basically did not accept this kind of religious rites and only focused on practicing Buddhism. She seldom went out. On the other hand, Xiao Wanru was not a layman and basically stayed in the back of the Yuhui nunnery. That part of the area was also off-limits to most pilgrims. Since Pushun Nun had accepted this task, she must be present on the first day of offering to the Buddha. When Xiao Wanru arrived at the Buddha hall, the maids and old maids of Duke Xing's mansion were busy. There were 7 or 8 of them. When they saw Xiao Wanru, they were stunned for a moment. After hearing Yu Jie say that she was the 5th miss, they all stepped back obediently. The 5th miss had no parents in the mansion and was not loved by Madame Dowager. However, the 5th miss had a noble grandmother who would not watch the 5th miss being bullied. If she made trouble, Madame Dowager would not be able to bear it. Xiao Wanru entered the main hall with Yu Jie and saw Pushun Nun in the main hall. Pushun Nun looked about 40 or 50 years old. She was very beautiful and had the same gentle aura as Xiao Wanru. Even though she was dressed in black, she also had a kind of softness that had been solidified by time, which made people feel very comfortable. Her beautiful hair had been shaved, but even so, this Master Pushun still gave Xiao Wanru a different feeling from other nuns. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes showed that she used to be beautiful. Not only her appearance, but if she was placed in a group of nuns, people could see her at a glance. Even if she stood with Mingqiu Nun, who had an outstanding appearance, people would not be surprised. Ignore her existence. As a young lady of an aristocratic family, she had no choice but to enter a nunnery because of the decline of her family, but her temperament was still outstanding. Anyone who saw her would have to praise this Pushun nun. She was indeed a lady from a century-old family. Hui Qing, who was standing beside Pushun nun, had already seen Xiao Wanru. She was stunned at first, and then hurriedly whispered something to Pushun nun, who had her eyes closed. Pushun nun nodded slightly, opened her eyes, and looked at Xiao Wanru calmly. "I have to trouble you this time, Master Pushan." Xiao Wanru came over and bowed to her with a smile. Her watery eyes were extremely bright, and she bowed sideways. Pushun nun smiled slightly and bowed to her, "Fifth Miss Xiao." Then he closed his eyes again and lowered his head. The prayer beads slowly slid across his hand as he continued to recite the scriptures. "Fifth Miss Xiao, if you have anything to say, you can tell me. My master usually doesn't interfere in matters." Hui Ming, who was beside Xiao Wanru, said with a kind smile. Nun said, "Hui Qing of Pushun nun," and began. "Nun nuo nun nun long. Nun long, nun nun nun," and came. "When did they come?" Xiao Wanru asked in a low voice. "Master will bring us here every day, but we don't know when exactly." Hui Ming said with a smile. "Hand, nun pus," Nuo, Xiao Wanru said, and walked to the Buddha statue in the middle. Hui Ming put her palms together slightly and followed her. She said with a smile, "Fifth Miss Xiao, if you think that the arrangement is inappropriate, you can rearrange it after telling me." "Is there a different arrangement?" Xiao Wanru looked curiously at the arrangement of the maids and old maids. Most of them were pastries and fruits, and some were offerings of materials. Then there were some small houses, pavilions, and other objects. Each piece was exquisitely crafted and placed according to a certain standard. "Yes, it's different. The previous arrangement was chosen by First Miss at will. But if you are not satisfied, you can choose another arrangement." Hui Ming took out a book-like thing from behind the Buddha statue. When she opened it, she could see the different arrangements of the offerings. There were also special names of the offerings. They were all very good names. Xiao Wanru looked at the top. It was indeed the pattern that was placed now. It was also the simplest one. It could be seen that Xiao Yinru had pointed it out casually. What surprised Xiao Wanru the most was that these paintings were extremely excellent and could even be said to be perfect. When the first Miss Xiao came to see the fifth Miss last time, she also visited the master by the way. At that time, she mentioned this matter. "The master asked me to show this album to the first Mississippi." The first Miss didn't look at it carefully and just pointed out the plate presentation method on it. At that time, she also said that if the fifth Miss was not satisfied, she could choose another one. Hui Ming explained with a smile. Xiao Wanru flipped through a few more. As expected, each of the following ones was more exquisite and better arranged than the one on the top. They immediately made the one on the top look inferior. It was obvious who was better. Xiao Wanru flipped through a few more and finally chose the best one among them. This one was obviously the best arranged one, and the lipstick was 10 Blessings and Wishes. Hui Ming had been following her. Seeing that she flipped through this one again, she knew that she was very satisfied with it. She immediately said with a smile, "Fifth Miss, you have a good eye. This one is indeed the best. If Fifth Miss chooses this one, I will arrange it. There are many people in your mansion, so it will be very fast to rearrange it. It's almost done. If you rearrange it, I'm afraid it's not good." Xiao Wanru looked up at the offerings that had been placed more than half. "Fifth Miss, you're too polite. It's originally a matter of our nunnery. We have to satisfy Fifth Mississippi. I heard that this time it's because of Fifth Miss's parents. If Fifth Miss changes, it's reasonable. Outsiders will only say that Fifth Miss is filial, cautious, and attentive to her parents." Hui Ming said with a smile. Her attitude was very kind. She felt the same as when she first met Pushun Nun. No one could find any bad in her. Forget it. It's chosen by Big Sister, and it has been placed. Xiao Wanru shook her hand and returned the album to Hui Ming. "Fifth Miss, it's really not troublesome, but if Fifth Miss insists, then forget it. If fifth miss feels that it's not suitable after a few days, you can tell this poor nun. This poor nun will definitely get someone to rearrange it. Hui Ming seemed to want to persuade her, but after saying a few words, she changed her mind. Yujie followed Xiao Wanru and looked Hui Ming up and down. This Hui Ming nun gave people a really good feeling. She was not only kind, but also gentle. It seemed that no matter what Xiao Wanru asked or wanted to do, she would do as Xiao Wanru said and didn't force her at all. She was more slick than Puyu Nun, who was the reception monk. Of course, the reception monk in Jingxin Monastery in the past couldn't even be compared with her. Thank you, Hui Ming nun. Xiao Wanru smiled and nodded. If fifth miss has nothing else to do, I will accompany my master to chant scriptures. Hui Ming put the album in her hand behind the Buddha statue and said with a smile. Nun, please help yourself. Xiao Wanru nodded. Hui Ming returned to Pushun Nun, closed her eyes, and chanted scriptures with Pushun Nun again with a peaceful face. However, Hui Qing, who had sat down before, seemed to be a little uneasy. She twisted her body slightly, opened her eyes to look at the Buddha beads in her hand, turned a few beads, and closed her eyes again. Xiao Wanru walked around the main hall and then went to the side hall. The arrangement of the side hall was very similar to the arrangement of the religious ceremony in Prime Minister Zhang's mansion. The side hall on one side was a place for the master to rest, and the tables and chairs were placed in a very standard way. The other side was an empty place. If the master needed sundries, he could put them in this side hall. The Buddhist offerings brought by Duke Xing's mansion were basically taken out and placed here. They brought a lot of things, but they were not completely placed until now. Some servant girls cleaned them up, and some old maids carefully took them to the main hall. It was a mess. When the servant girls and old maids saw Xiao Wanru coming over, they all put down the things in their hands and bowed together. Xiao Wanru waved her hand and motioned for them to do as they pleased. Then she walked over and looked at the offerings casually. There were really a lot of offerings which had not been sorted out and were piled up in a mess. Xiao Wanru's eyes suddenly fell on a few pairs of bracelets. They were silver bracelets. They were very exquisite patterns of the same thickness. Upon a closer look, even the patterns were made of thunder. There were 8 pairs in total. The silver bracelets looked a little fat, but the rings were not big. They looked like children's bracelets and were a little old. What are these? Seeing Xiao Wanru notice the 8 pairs of bracelets, Yujie pulled the old maid who had gone to report to Xiao Wanru and asked. These are the bracelets that the misses and childs wore when they were young. Old Madam also thought that they should be worshipped together. The old maid tilted her head to look at them and answered with a smile. Won't they be taken back later? Xiao Wanru looked at the exquisite and beautiful paper pavilion in front of her and asked curiously. These paper pavilions and things like that were going to be burned. The old maid explained with a smile, of course not. This is to get a good reputation. On the other hand, it is to bless the misses and childs to be safe and smooth. The old maid reached out to pick up a pair of small silver bracelets and said, this pair belongs to the first miss, so it was placed in the first position. Look, there is a small character on it, which is the first miss's name. Yujie took it and handed it to Xiao Wanru. As expected, there was a small character Ru on the side of the bracelet, which was worn by Xiao Yenru when she was young. Putting down the pair of bracelets, Xiao Wanru picked up another pair with interest and asked, are these my bracelets? But I have never worn them since I was born. Do they also belong to the fifth miss? The old maid looked at the pair of bracelets in Xiao Wanru's hands and said hurriedly, the fifth miss does have a bracelet. When Master Hao was born, Old Madam remade everything. This pair of bracelets was prepared by Old Madam long ago. Now it happens to belong to the 5th Mississippi. The old maid looked at the pair of bracelets in Xiao Wanru's hands and said hurriedly, they matched the 5th Miss's bracelets quite well. They were both sent to her, and the other was still in Old Madam's hands. She reached out to take another bracelet of Xiao Yenru's and put it together with her own bracelet. They were exactly the same as if they were made in the same mold. No matter the pattern or the style, there was no bias at all. She also noticed that the character Ru in her name was newly engraved. Chapter 500. After that, Xiao Wanru casually flipped through some objects to be offered. In fact, some pastries and so on could not be offered for a long time and had to be replaced every 2 days. Because the pastries had been offered in front of the Buddha, they were considered to be blessed. After people from the mansion came to replace the new pastries, they would take the old ones back and distribute them to the people in the mansion. As for the pavilions and other objects made of paper, they would be burned after the religious ceremony. Those light-colored clothes would be donated to the nuns of the Yuhui nunnery. There were also some gold and silver jewelry with good luck and evil spirits, like these pairs of silver bracelets. Naturally, they would be taken back. Even though these childs and misses could not wear them now, they could still be kept at the bottom of the box. In the future, they could be passed on to their children to wear, which was very blessed. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was really curious, from time to time picked up one and touched another to ask about it, the smile on the old maid's face also became vivid. The sweat on her face had already dried up, and she followed Xiao Wanru attentively and eagerly. After accompanying Xiao Wanru around for about 2 hours, the Buddha hall was almost full. Pushun Nun and her 2 disciples, Hui Qing and Hui Ming, had left at some point. Xiao Wanru asked the old maid to go about her business, and she took Yu Jie around casually. A servant girl moved a few things around. It seemed that she could not move them properly for a while, so a little nun of the nunnery came over to help her move them. The things around them were a little crowded, so they did not notice that there was a plate of pastries on the side. With a clang, the plate of pastries fell heavily to the ground. The plate with pastries fell to pieces. The servant girl and the nun were startled and stepped back again. Then they knocked over several things. Fortunately, these things were not porcelain. "Hey, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you keep an eye on them? Look, they fell." The old maid in charge rushed over in a hurry and said angrily as she asked someone to clean them up. The servant girl was startled and looked at Xiao Wanru timidly. Seeing that Xiao Wanru did not notice her, she breathed a sigh of relief. "Nanny, I will be careful next." "Be careful next time? Look at what you've done. Get out, go to the door and kneel for 2 hours." The old maid in charge said angrily. The servant girl did not dare to talk back. She put down the things in her hands, walked to the door of the main hall, and was about to kneel down. "Kneel to the side. What's the point of kneeling at the door?" The supervisor said angrily again. The maid wiped her tears and knelt to the side. Although the nun of the Yuhui nunnery was young, she seemed to be smart. She hurriedly took 2 steps back. Seeing that the old maid in charge didn't notice her, she turned around and ran away. She was not a servant of Duke Xing's mansion, so the supervisor old maid could not punish her, so she just turned a blind eye to it. "Fifth miss, please step aside. Look at this girl. She's so careless that she's brought all these things out. Even Buddha will blame her." The old maid in charge came over and bowed to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru obeyed and stepped back, but asked Yu Jie to fetch something. The collision just now had knocked out the picture album that Hui Ming had shown her before. She picked up the picture album, stood aside, and looked at it carefully. The old maid carefully asked a group of servant girls and old maids to clean up the things that had been broken just now, and then left with others. The hall immediately quieted down. "Miss, do you want to put it in another way?" Seeing that Xiao Wanru was looking at it seriously, Yu Jie immediately looked at the door and asked curiously, "Was there so much care in the arrangement of Jingxi nunnery in the past?" Xiao Wanru squinted at Yu Jie. Yu Jie thought for a moment and shook her head honestly. "Maybe the nunnery in the capital city is much more careful than that in our Jingxi nunnery. The arrangement in our nunnery is random. Not to mention that there are no picture albums. Even if there are not so many details." As Yu Jie said, she reached out to pinch the picture album and muttered to herself, "It must have cost a lot of money to make such a picture album. Shouldn't such a good picture album be in the hands of the abbess or the reception monk? No matter what, when Pushun Nun left just now, she should have taken the picture album with her." Xiao Wanru's hand paused. She suddenly raised her head from the picture album she was reading carefully and reached out to touch the material of the picture album. She was good at painting in her last life and in this life. She had always studied painting paper, So how could she not feel that the quality of the paper was excellent? Just now, she was still thinking that the picture album was so vivid. Now she knew that, on the one hand, the painter had a good foundation, and on the other hand, the material used for the painting was very good. Not only the paper was very good, but also the ink used was the best ink. Was the Yuhui nunnery in the capital city so rich now? Even if it was, it couldn't be so luxurious outside. Everything in the Yuhui nunnery was very gorgeous, but it also followed the standard of the nunnery in the past. This picture album was completely different from the style of the whole Yuhui nunnery in the past. She put it in front of her nose and smelled it. There was a smell of ink. Obviously, it was made not long ago. Could it be that it was just made and happened to be used in her mansion, so Pushun Nun specially took it out and used it? If Jingxi Nunnery wants to make a thing, and this thing is more gorgeous, do you think it will be used by itself? Xiao Wanru pinched the picture album in her hand, and her watery eyes became serious with a trace of coldness. There was something wrong with this picture album. How could it be used by itself? Even if it is a small Buddha statue, like a consecrated Buddha statue with golden light, it is either requested by pilgrims or given to distinguished guests. It is impossible for it to be used by itself. Yujie shook her head repeatedly. She had been in Jingxi Nunnery for a long time and saw a lot of things, but she had never seen her family use expensive and gorgeous things. Well, do you think this thing is for me to look through at will? Xiao Wanru lowered her head again, and the coldness in her eyes disappeared in a flash. The gorgeous picture album, the exquisite brush and ink, both the technique and the material were excellent. But now it was thrown here so casually, and it happened to come out. How could she not take it out and look through it again when she saw such a picture album just now when she couldn't see it clearly or was hesitant in her heart? Miss, put it away quickly. Yujie said anxiously with sweat on her forehead. She understood what Xiao Wanru meant. It's too late. Xiao Wanru said in a soft voice with a trace of coquettishness. Her eyes fell on the picture album in front of her, which was 10 Blessings as One Wishes, which she had looked through over and over again just now. There were a few obvious stains on it, but there were definitely no stains when she looked through it just now. Dirty? When did it happen? Yujie looked at the dirty red stains in astonishment and stuttered all of a sudden. She also saw her master look at it just now, but there were indeed no stains on it. When did the stains appear? She looked up at Xiao Wanru's body and found that there were no stains on her face. Then where did these stains come from? If the stains were there just now, she would definitely be able to see them clearly. Xiao Wanru picked up the picture album and brought it to her nose. Except for the smell of paint, there was no other smell in it, but it was in line with her guess. She blinked her watery eyes slightly, and the color in them became more and more intense. This picture album was indeed prepared for her. Let's go out and have a look. Xiao Wanru closed the picture album and said casually. Then she turned around and walked out. Miss, please leave the picture album here first, otherwise others will misunderstand. Yujie was extremely anxious. Even if I put it back now, there will still be many people who will accuse me of ruining the picture album. Just now, many people saw me pick it up and look at it, and some of them deliberately walked past me to take a look. They must have seen that the picture album is clean, Xiao Wanru said as she walked. This matter would not be over. She would like to see what they were up to and what Duke Xing's mansion wanted to do. Seeing her extremely peaceful look, Yujie was flustered, but she still breathed a sigh of relief. Her master should have a way. That was great. Although Xiao Wanru was young, Yujie had been with her for a long time, so she admired her more and more. As long as it was Xiao Wanru's order, even if Yujie did not understand it at the moment, she would do her best without hesitation. The master and the servant walked out of the main hall unhurriedly one after the other. They saw a group of people gathered outside the hall. They were not from Duke Ying's mansion, but most of them were pilgrims who came to the Yuhui nunnery. They gathered there and chattered about something. Yujie could not hear clearly from a distance, but she could only hear someone saying, "Poor girl. This is still in front of the Buddha hall. How can they punish her like this? Aren't they afraid of retribution? Yes, this little girl is so pitiful." She was punished to kneel here at such a young age. If her family could survive, who would be willing to send their children to this family? Of course, the meaning of their words was not good. Yujia suddenly had a bad feeling. She pointed at the crowd and then at the Buddha hall and stammered in horror, Could this be the servant girl who broke things inside? Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the crowd. From her position, she could not see clearly who was in the crowd. But when Yujia asked, she nodded with a cold smile and confirmed, "It must be that servant girl." Why should I do that? It was obviously the old maid who punished her. Why did she leave her here? It seems that it was you who punished her. Yujia pointed outside and then inside. After thinking it through, she flew into a rage. But just because I'm the master here, and the only master at that, shouldn't I be the one to take responsibility if something happens to my servants? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and walked out. "Miss, wait a minute. Put on a veil." Yujia took out a veil from her sleeve. Xiao Wanru stood still, and Yujia skillfully put on the veil for her. There was a picture book and a servant girl. What would they do next? Or in other words, there was also a silver bracelet, a longevity lock, and even a set of locked clothes. Chapter 501. In the crowd, the kneeling servant girl was in a sorry state, sobbing. There was a palm print on her face, and half of her face was red and swollen. Compared with the other side of her face, it was very obvious. "What's wrong with you? I asked you, but you didn't answer. Which family are you from? Who hit you? This is the Yuhui nunnery, and not anyone's mansion can punish you as they like. You are really a sinner. You are so arrogant outside. What can you do in the mansion?" Which mansion is she from? Some people were asking, some were sighing, and some were asking each other. It was really hard to tell which mansion a servant girl was from. No matter what they said or asked, the servant girl didn't say a word and still knelt there in tears. Outside the crowd, Xiao Wanru's watery eyes turned and fell on the kneeling servant girl. She was indeed the servant girl who had been punished to kneel before, but she didn't know who had slapped her face. She walked over slowly, stood in front of the servant girl, looked at her face, and squatted down to look at her eyes carefully. The servant girl's eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked at Xiao Wanru in front of her blankly, a little confused and at a loss. "Hey, why are you crying here? What happened?" Yujia's voice came from behind her with a little surprise. The servant girl turned around and immediately recognized Yujia. She turned to Yujia and said, "Sister Yujia, fifth miss?" "Fifth miss." Speaking of this, she immediately burst into tears. Behind her, Xiao Wanru stood up straight and looked at the servant girl's back indifferently. Her words sounded really vague. She was accusing her. "What happened to our miss? Who slapped you? Why are you still here?" Yujia looked her up and down with a surprised look on her face. "Fifth miss? Fifth miss?" The servant girl seemed to want to say something, but her voice was choked and she couldn't say a word clearly. Apart from the fifth miss, there was only the sound of crying. "What did our miss do to you? Tell me. You won't say that it was our miss who slapped you, will you?" Yujia asked impatiently. The servant girl shook her hand vigorously and continued to cry, but she did not say a word. Her eyes were panicked and her body trembled slightly. It seemed that she was very frightened. He was frightened by the fifth miss mentioned by Yujia. Which family's fifth miss is it? Which mansion is he from? Look at this pitiful man, he's really frightened. Even if it was really the fifth miss who did it, this girl wouldn't dare to say it. The crowd began to talk about it again with different opinions. In conclusion, it was Xiao Wanru, the fifth miss, who did it. Yujia squatted in front of the servant girl and reached out to touch the servant girl's face. "I didn't hit you, did I?" The handprint on the maid's face was still very obvious. Yujia's hand was relatively small, so it could be seen clearly that the handprint was not hers. Bigger than her hand. The maid shook her head hard this time and said in a panic, "It's not you. Sister Yujia, it's not you." Yujia breathed a sigh of relief. "It's good that it's not me. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it clearly later." "Since it's not me, who is it?" You tell me. I'll ask my miss to make the decision for you. Although we don't know the people in the mansion today and we don't know who hit you, we can always report it to old madam of the mansion. Yu Jie said angrily. The servant girl burst into tears. Why not? Are you afraid that someone will take revenge on you? Yu Jie frowned in confusion. Benefactor, are you from Duke Xing's mansion? A gentle voice suddenly came from outside the crowd. The crowd looked back and found that it was a nun from the Yuhui nunnery. The crowd made way for her. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the nun with deep eyes. She didn't expect that the nun still had a backup plan. The nun walked up to the servant girl, looked at the Buddha hall not far away, and then looked at the servant girl. She asked gently again, "Are you from Duke Xing's mansion, the servant girl who accompanied the 5th miss of your mansion to do the religious ceremony just now?" The servant girl nodded hard while crying. There was another wave in the crowd immediately. Because of Yu Jie's words, they felt that the 5th miss was unlikely to do it again. The 5th miss was the one who really did it. "Nun, what you said is so unreasonable. Our miss doesn't know any other servants in Duke Xing's mansion. Just now, she just accompanied and watched. It was the supervisor of Duke Xing's mansion who was in charge of the whole process. How can you say that she accompanied our miss to do the religious ceremony?" Yu Jie looked at the nun with a sneer. She didn't know this nun. The Yuhui nunnery was very big and there were many nuns. It was normal that she didn't know this nun. "Benefactor, I made a slip of the tongue," the nun said to Yu Jie calmly and modestly. Yu Jie ignored her, gave the handkerchief in her hand to the servant girl, and then pulled her up. The servant girl originally wanted to struggle and not get up, but Yu Jie was strong. She dragged her up with one hand and said, "If you have something to say, stand up and say it. Don't cry like this. Just tell me who beat you." The servant girl stood up and looked around in panic. There were many concerned faces on her left and right, and there was also a face with a veil. She didn't know any of them. "Just say it. So many of us are listening. This is not Duke Xing's mansion. You can't be arrogant and domineering here." "Yes. Yes. And where is the original nun of the nunnery?" Perhaps the words of the crowd moved the servant girl and gave her some courage. She wiped her tears and said timidly, Fifth miss, you mean our miss beat you?" Yu Jie immediately raised her voice and said loudly. Seeing that the servant girl was still crying, she said, "Don't talk. Just nod or shake your head." Everyone quieted down and looked at the servant girl's head. Seeing that she nodded imperceptibly after hesitation, they immediately became excited. As expected, it's the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion. She seems to be a ruthless person. Of course. She asked someone to kneel in front of the Buddha hall as a punishment. This is the Yuhui nunnery. Which miss with good etiquette would do such a thing? That's right. I don't know what kind of vicious person the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion is. Isn't she afraid of offending Bodhisattva and making her suffer? Immediately, a few people put their palms together in panic and were about to bow to the Buddha hall from a distance, looking nervous and scared. The nun also put her palms together and chanted the name of Buddha in the direction of the Buddha hall in a low voice. There was some commotion in the crowd. Even the nun of the Yuhui nunnery did this. They were afraid that Buddha would really punish them. Most of the people in the Yuhui nunnery came to worship Buddha, so they naturally believed in this kind of thing. With their faces slightly pale, they followed the nun to chant the name of Buddha. "Well, this matter is over. Go back to where you came from. Buddha can see all living beings." After chanting the name of Buddha, the nun said gently, Thank you, nun." The servant girl wiped her face and was about to leave with a limp. Xiao Wanru winked at Yu Jie. It was really hard to explain if she asked the servant girl to leave at this time. "Hey, don't go. You said that it was our miss who hit you. Why did she hit you? Our miss has been in the Buddha hall all the time just now. When did she hit you? Since you said that it was our miss who hit you, you have to make it clear. Are you trying to blame our miss for being so ambiguous?" Yu Jie reached out to hold the servant girl and shouted loudly. Her loud and confident look attracted many people's attention. "Just now you said that it was our miss who hit you, but you don't even know our Mississippi. How could it be our miss who hit you? Our miss has been living in the Yuhui nunnery all the time. Today, Only I came out as a servant girl. You and other people came here to set up the table today. Our miss and I just watched from the side. How could you blame our miss for what happened? Yujia became louder and louder, saying one sentence after another. Since the slap on your face was not made by me, it must be made by our miss, right? Except for me, our miss can't order you around. Now I'm going to ask miss to come over and compare the palm print to see if it is made by Mississippi. As Yujia spoke, she turned around and was about to leave. The servant girl was so anxious and hurriedly reached out to hold her. What are you doing? Your face is so swollen. If it gets swollen for a while, I won't be able to see the palm print clearly. If we go there late, it will be even more difficult to explain. Yujia pushed away the servant girl's hand and said angrily. The servant girl cried and pulled her hand with a face full of panic and fear. It was hard to tell whether it was because of a guilty conscience or because of real fear. Was the palm print on your face made by your fifth miss? Xiao Wanru said lightly. The servant girl nodded at first, and then shook her head. She still didn't say a word, but tears fell down in pairs, looking extremely pitiful. Do you know me? Xiao Wanru asked gently. The servant girl shook her head hard. There were strangers around her, but she remembered Yujia's face very clearly. Her tears blurred her vision. Since you don't know me, why do you keep hinting that I hit you? Xiao Wanru's eyes became more and more indifferent. Yujia came over, bowed to Xiao Wanru respectfully and said, Miss. For a moment, everyone was shocked and looked at Xiao Wanru in front of her in astonishment. She had been here for a while and had met the servant girl's eyes during this period. The servant girl obviously didn't know her, but the servant girl in front of them was the fifth miss mentioned by the servant girl just now. The meaning of this was enough to make many people wake up at once. Slander. It's actually a servant who slandered her master. How dare a servant slander her master? There must be someone behind her. I remember. Isn't the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion the miss who was recognized and returned to her family a few years ago? It is said that the whole Duke Xing's mansion doesn't like her, and she was forced to enter the Yuhui nunnery to observe mourning for her parents for 3 years? Someone connected the dots and came to such a conclusion. Suddenly, this buried old matter was dug up. Yujia, send someone to send her to old madam and ask her who wants to hurt me this time. Xiao Wanru said with tired eyes. Although only a pair of cold and charming watery eyes could be seen, there was no doubt that she was sad. After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave without looking at the crowd. Fifth miss? Fifth miss, you didn't hit me. It was the supervisor nanny who punished me just now. The servant girl finally said a complete sentence and knelt down heavily in front of Xiao Wanru's back. Chapter 502. Yujia took a step forward and stood in front of Xiao Wanru. She glared at the servant girl angrily and said, Then why didn't you make it clear just now? You just kept crying when I asked you. You said that our miss was hiding something. What would others think of our miss? I just wanted to ask the fifth miss to plead for mercy from the nanny in charge. The servant girl burst into tears and said anxiously. Xiao Wanru lowered her watery eyes and looked at the servant girl silently. She didn't want to argue with her, so she waved her hand and said, The old maid in charge has left. You can go back to the mansion first. Yes, I'll go back right away. The servant girl wiped her tears, stood up and left in a hurry. Even though she limped, she walked in a hurry, as if someone was chasing after her. Everyone present looked at the servant girl's back in astonishment and couldn't even say a word. It was obvious that there was something wrong with the servant girl. She had deliberately led others to suspect the fifth Mississippi. But in fact, she couldn't even recognize the fifth miss standing in front of her. How could the fifth miss be the one who punished her? She had been crying and couldn't explain it clearly before, but now she said it very smoothly. Not only was she very smooth, but she also ran away quickly. It was obvious that she had a guilty conscience. When everyone came to their senses, Xiao Wanru and her servant girl had already left. The onlookers were talking about it as they left. They all thought that the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion was a poor person. Not only did her parents die early, but even her relatives in the mansion treated her coldly because she had been living outside. She had been forced to hide in the Yuhui nunnery before, and now she was slandered by the servants in the mansion. No one knew whether old madam really didn't like this granddaughter or the current madam of Duke Xing did it. Although it was said that it was done in the name of old madam, it was said that the inner court of Duke Xing's mansion was in charge of madam of Duke Xing. If there was really a servant who wanted to frame the fifth miss, it was most likely to be madam of Duke Xing. She had no blood relationship with the fifth Miss Xiao, and it was faintly said that madam of Duke Xing hated the fifth Miss Xiao very much. There were different opinions about what happened 2 years ago. Now things had changed. At this time, more and more people began to talk about this matter, which was something that old madam didn't expect. Xiao Wanru returned to the silence room and looked at the picture album in her hand. There were thick stains on the picture album. Yujia had carefully wiped them with a handkerchief, but she still failed to wipe them off. Not only did she fail to wipe them off, but the colors on the picture album were also different because of Yujia's wiping, which made it even uglier. Miss, this mark wasn't there before. Why did it suddenly appear later? Yujia still didn't understand why such a phenomenon would appear. The originally clean album suddenly had a stain on it after being in the young Miss's hands for a while. She was sure that at that time, there was absolutely nothing spilled on the album. When the young miss was looking at it, she could see it clearly from the side. Then where did this stain that appeared out of nowhere come from? Xiao Wanru reached out her finger and scratched the stain. She scraped off some color and put it in front of her nose. After taking a whiff, a glint flashed across his eyes. The color appeared out of nowhere? She really knew about it. The paint made of fengxiao flower could not show its color for a while. After a period of time, it would show its previous color. Fengxiao flower was tasteless, but the paint made of it must be bright. If no other color was added, the whole color would be bright but not very clean, just like the stain at present. This was told to her by the Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion, who had taught her painting skills in her last life. However, in her memory, the appearance of the Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion had always been a vague existence. She couldn't remember anything about him clearly, as if the memory about him had been blurred by clouds. This was also the reason why Xiao Wanru was anxious when she saw the signature of Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion. Fengxiao flower was not something that ordinary people could get. It was a good product for making some special pigments. If one didn't know much about painting, he wouldn't know about it at all. She reached out to pinch the paper of the picture album and said to Yujia, "Where is the new stack of painting paper sent last time? I'll look for it." Yujia stood up, walked to a corner of the silence room and rummaged through it. After a while, she came over with a stack of delicate paper and said, "Miss, is this the stack you want?" Xiao Wanru reached out to pinch it. Feeling the paper under her hand, she nodded. "Are these two kinds of paper the same?" Yujia somewhat understood what Xiao Wanru meant. She reached out to pinch it with both hands, and then frowned and said, "Miss, although these two kinds of paper feel good, they are obviously not the same kind of paper." "Even if they are not the same kind of paper, it doesn't matter." Xiao Wanru smiled, took a few pieces of paper and the picture album, and walked to the desk by the window. There were ink and various paints in front of the desk, which was originally the place where she painted. Xiao Wanru spread the paper on the table and looked at the stained paper again. Then she picked up the writing brush and began to write according to the words on it. The paintings in the picture album were very good, especially this one. It could be seen that a lot of thought had been put into it. Even if it was only this one, she could feel the proficiency and the superb skills of the painter. It was definitely not something that ordinary people could draw. Even if she went down the mountain to ask a painter to draw it, she might not be able to find one. However, the painting skills of Pushan Nun on the mountain must be good, and Xiao Yenru's painting skills at the foot of the mountain were also very good. However, what they didn't know was that Xiao Wanru's painting skills, which had been brought from the last life to the present, were also very good. If it weren't for her good painting skills, she wouldn't have become the painter of the beauties in the last life. Moreover, she was recognized by the beauties and many people came to ask her to draw a painting. During the consort selection of the beauties in the royal family, there would be portraits sent to the palace. It was said that some painters of the previous dynasty also received bribes. If they didn't draw well, they would even lose their lives in the end. After that, the painters of the previous dynasty tried to draw more realistically and clearly, which required high skills of the painters. The painting in the picture album was the same. After watching Xiao Wanru's painting for more than 2 years, Yu Jie, who didn't understand anything at all, became a little bit confused. She could also see that the painter of this picture album had an extraordinary foundation. Her eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's tender white face with some admiration. Her face was calm, her eyes were dark, her face was delicate and charming, and her cherry lips were slightly pursed. No matter from which aspect, it could be seen that Xiao Wanru was very attentive and worked very hard to draw this painting. Xiao Wanru only ate a little for lunch. After that, she didn't even take a nap and continued to draw. She didn't have much time, and those people wouldn't give her much time. Even though she had been making the best use of her time, she still drew until dinner time. For a few hours, she had been drawing non-stop. When she finished, she felt sore all over. Xiao Wanru put down the brush in her hand and waved her hand. Her eyes fell on the painting she had just finished and the painting in the picture album. The two paintings were almost identical, and even the angle of color treatment looked very similar. She took a deep breath of relief and ordered, "Go and ask Qing, come here." "Yes, I'll go and ask Qing, come here right away." Yu Jie nodded and called in Qing, who was squatting in the corridor outside and playing with nothing to do. She knew that this little girl called Qing was not as harmless as she appeared to be. How could the person sent by Prince Chen be really harmless? "Take this painting and this picture album away. Ask someone to paste the painting and bind it into the album, and remove the damaged one," Xiao Wanru ordered. Yu Jie packed up all the things on the table, put them in a box, and then handed it to Qing. "Miss, when do you want it?" Took the box without any surprise and asked with a smile. She looked young and innocent with some baby fat on her face. "Tomorrow morning." Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said. She felt that they wouldn't give her much time to finish this picture album. "All right, miss, this servant will go down the mountain once." Qing nodded. Qing nodded and said with a smile. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and waved her hand. She knew that Qing could do it, or Chu Luqian, who was behind Qing could do it. But she didn't need to ask about the details. "Be careful on the way." But she still specially reminded her. It was getting late, and the pilgrims who wanted to go down the mountain had already gone down the mountain. Those who stayed would not go down the mountain. The people who went down the mountain at this time were particularly conspicuous, especially the people around her. Fortunately, Qing was just a little servant girl, and she was an inferior servant girl. If it were Yu Jie, she would not be able to go down the mountain in any case. Moreover, Qing's servant girl was a pretentious one. Xiao Wanru was not anxious about whether she could go down the mountain or not. "Miss, don't worry. I know." Qing understood tacitly. She bowed to Xiao Wanru again, and then went out with the long box in her arms. Xiao Wanru had her own carriage on the mountain. The carriage had been parked in the parking lot of the Yuhui Nunnery, and the coachman had a room on the side, which was also rented from the Yuhui Nunnery. There was still a short distance from the gate of the Yuhui Nunnery, so it couldn't be regarded as inside the Yuhui Nunnery. When Xiao Wanru was on the mountain, the coachman usually lived in this room unless he had something to do. There were several rooms like this beside the parking lot. The coachmen who sent their masters to the Yuhui Nunnery to worship Buddha often rested and drank tea in the empty room, waiting for their masters to come back after worshipping Buddha. Xiao Wanru had never gone down the mountain, but her servant girls went down the mountain from time to time. The carriage became their means of transportation. Seeing Qing coming out, the coachman of Duke Xing's mansion happened to see her. He came up to her with a smile and asked, "Miss Qing, what's the matter?" Great Elder Princess gave something to 5th Miss before, and 5th Miss also has something to give to Great Elder Princess. I'll send it to her now. Please go down the mountain. Qing said with a smile. She looked young and innocent, which made people have a good impression on her. The coachman was in a dilemma. "What, can't I?" If it doesn't work, I'll borrow the carriage next to it. No matter which family it is, when we arrive at and Great Elder Princess's mansion, I will definitely thank them heavily. Qing rolled her eyes and pointed at the carriages parked on the side with a smile. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.